What is up, you guys? I was just noticing in that promo, it's actually going to be Stephen Greenstreet on Thursday, not John Greenstreet. Please forgive some of these misspellings on this calendar because, man, these weeks, this has been the first 2 days off in a row that I've had in over a month. So I appreciate the patience. I'm going to get that changed. Sorry, Michael. Welcome you guys to another episode of the Singularity Lab. We're going to be getting started here in a few minutes. We're waiting for Avi Loeb to pop in. Yes, you heard correctly. Avi Loeb is here today. We also got Graham Goche, right? Graham Goche. I almost messed it up. And of course, we're going to have our really good friend, Mr. Jamarl Thomas from the Progressive Soapbox. If you're looking for a really great progressive political channel that every once in a while does some really great UAP discussion, definitely check out his channel. We're going to be talking to him in the second hour with Graham. So welcome you guys. What was I going to do? There was something I was going to read the comments. That's going to be fun. But yeah, to this week's, we've got some great guests. So if you haven't rung the bell, if you haven't liked the channel, if you haven't subscribed to Michael's channel, do it now. Which reminds me, I should probably retweet Michael's tweet that he probably just put out a few minutes ago, making sure that we get everyone in here. If you haven't shared this stream, let's try and share it for Michael as much as we can. He's so close to 1,000 followers. We could taste it. Let's get him monetized. Let's get this channel monetized. He's working 2 days a week to bring this to you, and 3 days a week with me to bring you the unidentified celebrity review. So let's do all we can to share the love. I'm just retweeting it now. Get in here. Right? That's good. Let's go. Get in here live now. What? All in caps with exclamation points. So there we go. Boom. Avi Loeb, Fringe Science, UFOs in Academia, Michael Mataluni, Kristen Mataluni, Mr. Avi Loeb. I see he's in the back. He's ready to go. Woo! 38 of you guys in here. Share the channel. Let's see if we can get it up to 100. This is a great guest, so let's see what we can do. Oh, check this out. Jake from It's Redacted is in the house. Welcome, dude. Engaging academia is important. 100% with you. Thank you so much for being here, man. Honestly, it's always a pleasure that you're checking out our show. Jazz Shaw. The public wants to know Avi Loeb's take on dolphin theory. Give the people what they want. More dolphins. We're gonna share that theory with Avi. Let's see what he says about it. Rather's in the house. What's going on, Rather? Burning that midnight oil. I have a feeling it'll be worth it. Tuning out of the work to listen here. Thank you, Mr. Rather Be Squidding. I do appreciate it. Dano is in the house. NP, always a pleasure to see you here. We're up to 45 followers right now. So, guys, thank you for being here. I heard Lou Elizondo on the Disclosure team in his stream yesterday say, man, I wish I could change the name of followers to something a little more neutral, like colleagues or friends instead of followers, because you shouldn't follow anyone in any aspect of your life, right? You should just be independent and go your way, or figure things out for yourself. Ask the tough questions. Don't go with the crowd all the time. So I thought that was interesting instead of followers. So what do you guys think? So while you ponder that, I think we could get the show started. We're ready to go, right? Okay, cool. Well, let me do this then.
Welcome, everybody. I am so excited today. We've got an amazing show for you. We've got one and only. Oh, can you hear me okay?
No, we're good. I just switched the cameras and it was all too small. So
All good, all good.
Yeah,
We've
there we
got
go.
an amazing show for you. For those of you who don't know, and I think you must have been living under a rock, we've got Avi Loeb with us today. And he's somebody that you can't underestimate his scientific acumen with over 900 scientific papers, 8 books, 3 decades of Ivory League experience. Avi is the top of his field in astronomy and astrophysics. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Avi Loeb.
Hey, Avi Loeb.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
It's a great pleasure to have you, Avi. We really appreciate you joining us. We've got a lot to talk with you about today, and we really appreciate you spending your time with us. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Okay, so let's dive right in. Avi, you have a brand new op-ed piece that you have in Scientific American today, and I just kind of wanted to get your first take on that because, you know, obviously we have this interesting 180-day UAP report coming out from the government. You know, you brought up this idea of Oumuamua. You hypothesized that it could potentially be an extraterrestrial solar sail back in 2018. And it's very interesting how these sorts of things are coming together at this time. So I'm really curious, what inspired you to write that article, and what are your thoughts on UAPs?
Right. So it was clear that the push of the sunlight is not making a big difference to the trajectory of Oumuamua. And the only conclusion you could have drawn from the data that is being pushed is that it's very thin and has a flat shape based on the reflection of sunlight. And that was pretty much what the evidence indicated. Since then, in September 2020, there was another object discovered by the same telescope in Hawaii called Pan-STARRS. And this object was given the name 2020 SO. You can find it on Wikipedia. And a few weeks after it was discovered, the astronomers that found it realized, actually, if you extrapolate the trajectory back in time, it came from Earth in 1966. It's a rocket booster that was launched in a lunar lander mission, and it had very thin walls. And that's why it exhibited an excess push away from the sun without a cometary tail. So this was clearly an artificial object that we know about because we produced it. And obviously it was not produced to be a light sail, it was just thin and therefore had a lot of area for its mass, and therefore was pushed by reflecting sunlight at a noticeable level. So it's quite possible that Oumuamua was pushed by sunlight not because it was designed to be a light sail. So then the question is, what could have been the purpose of Oumuamua being so thin and large, the size of a football field, and flat? And now that we are awaiting the UAP report that will be delivered by the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to Congress, there were some leaks that some very respectable people point out that these objects may be real. Some of the objects that are considered as unidentified may be real, and their nature is not fully understood. So it occurred to me that if there was some previous mission to the solar system from outside the solar system that deployed probes that were sprinkled on Earth a long time ago, and these probes are responsible for the UAP, the unidentified objects, then every now and then there would be some receiver coming over to collect the data, to communicate with them, to get some information from them. And Oumuamua was tumbling, basically looking in all directions every 8 hours, and potentially that was related to the fact that it was a receiver. So I'm making the conjecture that perhaps Oumuamua was related to UAP. And of course, that can be tested experimentally. Well, first of all, by examining UAP and trying to figure out their nature, collecting data in the open using scientific instruments rather than the sensors that the government owns, which are classified, and therefore some of the data is classified. So that's one path to follow in order to figure out the nature of those and figure out whether there are probes that are extraterrestrial, or maybe they're just natural here on Earth and we just didn't understand their origin beforehand. And the second path to follow is whenever we see an object like Oumuamua in the future, in the coming years, maybe with the Pan-STARRS telescope, maybe with the Vera Rubin Observatory, if we get an alert early enough, we can send a spacecraft that will intercept the trajectory of such an object and take a close-up photograph. And they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. In my case, a picture is worth 66,000 words, the number of words in my book. I wouldn't need to write a book if we had a photograph of this object, which can tell us whether it's natural or artificial. And we could even land on it if it looks artificial and read off the label made on planet X. Also bring the technology to Earth because it may represent our future and it may be worth a lot of money. It's just like the feeling of holding a cell phone that was not yet released to the public and playing with its features.
This is so fascinating to me because the first time we spoke, that was one of the things that we were talking about was this idea that what would this need to be in order to be some sort of, not spying device, but device that was gathering data. And so it's really interesting that the anomalous effect actually could be this idea that it was toppling over in that way in order to collect those data from those probes. Are you familiar with the idea of von Neumann probes?
Yes, so I wrote a follow-up to the op-ed that appeared today, and it was just accepted for publication. And basically, there is the possibility, most stars formed billions of years before the sun. So if some of them had technological civilizations that, like ours, they predated us by billions of years, and they could have sent equipment into space. And we are currently developing artificial intelligence, AI systems, that are already taking over some of the tasks that were previously assigned to human intelligence, to natural intelligence. And you can imagine that within a decade from now, not very long into our future, these systems will learn on their own, will make their decisions. They will be intelligent enough that you can trust them even more than a person, at some level, because they go through many computations well beyond the human brain. And so just imagine a decade from now putting an AI system on a CubeSat, a small spacecraft, equipped with a 3D printer. Then if such a thing lands on another planet, it can reproduce, it can duplicate itself, produce many copies, and continue to send more and more of these devices into space and visit. Within 1 billion years, you can visit the entire Milky Way galaxy, practically every habitable zone around a star, because if you multiply all the time, and the travel is much less than 1 billion years, it will take tens of millions of years at the speed of chemical rockets. So we could pretty much imagine that within 1 billion years, you populate all the habitable zones with probes that could potentially check what's going on. Now, these would be autonomous probes. They will not necessarily communicate back to their sender because it takes a huge amount of time. It takes tens of thousands of years for the signal to cross the galaxy. So, nobody would wait. Nobody would be that patient to wait for that long, but they would be autonomous and they would have their own agenda and they would probe things on habitable planets.
Right, and that's fascinating, this idea of the self-replication and their ability to gather materials on those planets and then...
Nope. Did we all lose Michael there for a second?
We lost Michael.
Oh.
Did you lose me?
You were a little choppy. Yeah, you were a little choppy there.
Question. This episode is really about how you and others are making hypotheses that are outside of the scientific mainstream. And, you had quite a lot of pushback when you made your hypothesis in 2018 about Oumuamua. Now that we're seeing UAPs in the mainstream media and we're seeing this kind of this fascination take hold across the country and the globe, Where do you see this headed? How can we capitalize on this momentum when it comes to bringing things that aren't mainstream into mainstream academia?
Well, I think the subject, given that it's not a national security risk, because otherwise the report would not appear in public, right? So if we know that it's not the Chinese or the Russians that are producing these objects, then the subject should move away from the talking points of politicians, military personnel, or national security advisors to the realm of science. And
right.
In science, instead of relying on instruments, sensors that are classified, and therefore the data from them cannot be released to the public, instead of that, you can basically buy cameras off the shelf, state of the art, and place them on wide field telescopes in locations of interest and monitor the sky, collect the data, and analyze if there is anything unusual. And that data will be open, and the analysis of the data will be transparent. I mean, we're not in the dark ages, we are in the 21st century, and it's not a mystery or we cannot speak about miracles. It's just a question of science addressing this subject in the scientific way and collecting data, analyzing it, and clearing up the fog. The worst we can do is to have this report saying there are some objects we don't understand, although they seem to be real, and then that fuels speculations in the public, and the scientific community at the same time ridicules the subject and shies away from studying it. I think that's the worst that we can imagine. In my view, given that the public is so interested, the scientific community has an obligation to examine these objects and figure out what they are. And we can do that with the existing instruments. It will not be a mystery once we collect the data. And I'm willing to be engaged in such a study myself or to lead such a study if there are people willing to fund it, either in the federal funding line or in the private sector.
So do you see that as where do you see that money coming from? Where could it come from? If the three of us went out and pushed for it, where should we go?
Well, it's not a lot of money. I think with tens of millions of dollars in principle, you can address it quite extensively. And that kind of money is being invested in searches for dark matter. We don't know what most of the matter in the universe is. Mm-hmm. So there are experiments funded at that level, many of them actually. It's just a matter of deciding that this is a priority and that this subject should not be ridiculed because the public cares about it. And the public funds science, by the way. I should mention that because the point is, every now and then science has an obligation to address a topic of social interest. And we had such a situation during the pandemic where a vaccine had to be developed.
Right.
And it was a great success. We produced a chemical in the lab, a synthetic chemical that that resulted in the desired immune response of hundreds of millions of people. And that is a remarkable celebration of science, in the sense that when we understand something, we know how to act. And in much the same way, I think scientists should clear the fog with respect to UAP or unidentified objects that we find. And if they have some mundane explanations, let's figure them out. I mean, there is
so be it, right?
Shame about, yeah.
Right, because go ahead, Lou.
No. Finish your thought.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, because I think it's so important. It doesn't really, at the end of the day, the most important thing is the truth, right? And so if you're biased in the mainstream because you're unwilling to look at these things because you think they're fringe or you think they're silly, that's a problem. If you're biased because you believe they have to be extraterrestrial, then that's a problem too, because we're using our biased lens to focus on something that we're interested in. We need to get the truth. We need more data. In order to do that, we need to get it funded.
Right, and I was asked by the Harvard Gazette, what is the one thing I would like to change about the world? And I said, I would like my colleagues and other people to behave more like kids. Kids do not have a prejudice. They put some skin in the game. They're willing to check things. And that's why they get bruised every now and then. So when a kid looks at an object, the kid turns it around and looks from all directions. You might think it's a play, the kid is playing with the object, but in fact, the kid is trying to learn about the object. And an adult looking at the same object from one direction says, I can pretty much guess what the object looks like from the other side. Why don't I just save the effort of actually checking? And as a result, the adult never discovers new things about the object. And so I think we should adopt the approach of kids. Basically, it's a learning experience about nature, about the world, and we shouldn't be guided by our prejudice. We shouldn't be within the box. We should think openly and let the evidence guide us rather than our prejudice. Because, last time I checked in history, there were philosophers that were sure that the sun moves around the earth. They didn't want to look through Galileo's telescope, and they put him in house arrest. And, I rest my case.
Hervinder Sanila says, does Avi think of people like Neil deGrasse Tyson who laugh off the UFO, UAP subject are akin to those who refuse to look through Galileo's telescope?
Well, what I find troubling in this context is the attention that some people give to how many likes they get on Twitter. And that to me is like basketball players looking at the audience instead of paying attention to the ball. And you know what happens in a game if you look at the audience and you're trying to please the audience by doing all kinds of tricks without looking at the ball? You never score. And so that's my criticism, that let's forget about ourselves and how popular we are, which pretty much is the objective of many people, trying to improve their image and the way they are looked at. And but instead, let's try and figure out what nature is about without prejudice. It's not about us. It's a dialogue with nature that we are having, and that should be guided by evidence and rather than by our ego. And that is my main criticism. It's not so much that people say, I don't really care so much about this subject, or I don't think it's this or that. It's the fact that they're not willing to be guided by evidence, not willing to put skin in the game and take some risks. Life is not exciting if you don't take risks. You will never discover something new this way.
Right. How do you suggest, obviously you said you'd be interested in potentially even leading this sort of investigation or inquiry. Is Harvard interested in that? Are you seeing any sort of shift in the mainstream academia now that you see the media taking note in this phenomenon? Well,
what I can tell you is that I had some wealthy individuals, one of whom basically donated money to my research. As a result of, I've never met that person. He read what I write and what I talk about and was excited about it. I've never heard of a situation like that when someone is willing to give you money for your research without even meeting you or talking with you. And there was another person that visited the porch in my home to discuss with me a potential interest. And, that to me demonstrates that, first of all, the public has its heart in the right place. It's not trapped by prejudice. And there are people out there, that are excited about this line of inquiry. And I'm willing to commit myself to this line of inquiry if funding is obtained at the right level.
That's amazing.
No, that is cool. I got so many questions just based off a lot of things you just said. First of all, I want to say thank you. The fact that you're Harvard chair, all of the, the degrees behind you and the books you read, all the work you've done, building this credibility to come out in the open and just start talking about this at the veracity that you do is amazing. Sure, maybe you're trying to sell a book, but I think you're taking a lot more on the chin than you are gaining from this. And I just wanted to point that out and just say thank you. I mean, I wish we had 10, 15, 20 more Avi Loebs. How much more progressive the scientific discussion would be if people would just have a little bit of guts.
Well, thank you.
And not be afraid to just talk about this. Just the idea. I mean, we're not asking for a lot. Just let's have the conversation. That's it. Right. And the fact that they fight you so hard on this is mind-boggling to me. They're calling
Right.
themselves scientists. Do you think part of that is because they're protecting a grant, or they're protecting an image, or, you know, they can't sell their book because all of a sudden all of their work is kind of, I don't want to say obsolete, but it doesn't work in this scenario. So
Right.
maybe that's why they're not as open to jump into it.
Well, a few comments. One, you know, my publicist in the UK, my book was translated to 25 languages and has 28 editions and became a bestseller in many countries. My publicist in the UK sent me an email in February saying, "Great job, Avi, or the book is selling very well." And I sent a reply message to him and I said, "I'm not trying to sell my book. I'm just trying to convey a message here. And you know, if the public wouldn't like the message and the book wouldn't sell, I wouldn't care less. I would still deliver the same message. So I'm not here to sell the book. I'm actually..."
Well, no, you should be. You should want to sell the book.
No.
We want people to read the book. Go buy Avi's book because it's important, man. If you don't sell the book, then nobody's talking about it. That's not what we want. We want to inspire that 12-year-old to pick up your book, read it, and go, wow,
Right.
this is a different way of thinking. There might be something else out there beyond, I don't know, being a nurse or being a doctor. Like, I could figure out the extraterrestrial theory, you know? So sell the book, Avi. Don't be ashamed in that, man.
No, the point is, if there was another way to convey the message, if people would just follow what I write in Scientific American or some other way, I wouldn't care less, you know, as long as the message gets out. And the other point I wanted to make is that at a young age, you know, I served in the military in the paratroopers. And there was a saying that sometimes a soldier has to put his body on the barbed wire so that others will cross through. And, you know, even though it's painful sometimes for me to hear the pushback, I do feel that it serves a bigger purpose than myself. It will allow, hopefully in the future, a more honest discussion on this subject by the young generation. And that's really my goal in this context. Yeah.
I have one more quick thing. Sorry, Mikey. So, okay. I love the idea of sending scouts and AI up there to take pictures and all of that. But here's kind of a little bit of my issue. So we see Oumuamua come into our solar system. It's the first interstellar object to ever be recorded, correct?
Yes.
What the hell took so long to get telescopes, satellites, Hubble? Like, why was that not an alarm bell for science to go, blah, 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 get every telescope and let's look at it right now? And is it red tape? What's going on there? Why could we not do that?
So first I should explain that before Pan-STARRS, this telescope in Hawaii on Mount Haleakala that discovered Oumuamua, before that there wasn't a survey telescope capable of seeing objects of this size. The way we see them is that the sun acts as a lamppost that illuminates the darkness around us, and when there is an object big enough, it reflects enough sunlight so we can see it. Just like looking for your keys under the lamppost. So the object was just big enough, the size of a football field, for us to see it. And apparently, you know, within every few years, there's supposed to be an object of this size that we see coming from outside the solar system. And we were lucky, we saw it. Now, I should say that I wrote the first paper in collaboration with two colleagues, Ed Turner and Amaya Moore-Martin, a decade earlier, forecasting how many rocks we should expect from other stars. And we concluded, based on the solar system, what we know about the solar system, that if the planetary systems around other stars are similar to the solar system, there is no chance that Pan-STARRS will find any rock of the size of Oumuamua by orders of magnitude. So that's the reason it was interesting for me, the mere fact that an object was discovered that came from outside the solar system, because I didn't expect it. We shouldn't have seen anything. And that to me raises the question of why did we see, and why did the first object that we see, why did it look so unusual, so weird?
Right.
That's what drew me into it. Now, the rest of the community pretty much assumed even though the mass budget doesn't quite work out, and other people perfected it and demonstrated that indeed you wouldn't expect anything based on what we know about planetary systems, even though the mass budget is not easy to explain. Nevertheless, they said, okay, but it's probably just a rock from another star. And it's either a comet. Initially, people said it's a comet. Then we didn't see a cometary tail, no gas or dust around it, to a very tight limit with a Spitzer Space Telescope. And then they said, okay, it's an asteroid, just a rock. But then it was pushed away from the sun by some force. And you can't have a force if you don't have evaporation of cometary material. So that's where it was not a comet, nor an asteroid of the type that we have seen before. And unfortunately, at that point, when it was clear that it's nothing that we have seen before, it was already gone. And the community didn't really collect all the data possible. And I think, it's one of these cases where an object is assumed to be something, and by the time you figure out that the guest that came close to your door is unusual, the guest is already out to the dark street. And by now, Oumuamua is 1 million times fainter than it was close to Earth. So we can't really observe it, but there should be many more coming through this region that we can monitor in the future.
Right. So for those of you who just joined us, we've got Avi Loeb with us today. Thank you so much for your comments in the comment section. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can for Avi. Unfortunately, we don't have the super chat because we're not at 1,000 subscribers yet. So make sure you like and share this and get it out there so more people can hear what Avi has to say. You can also click the link below. We've got a Patreon. If you want to link to that, we can definitely use your support. Avi, let me ask you this. A lot of folks have asked in the chat here if you're connected to Eric Weinstein at all. He is a mathematician out of MIT, and he's very public about his interest in this UFO UAP phenomenon. Is he somebody you've been reached out to or have spoken with?
No, I've never met him or spoke with him.
Okay. All right. Well, we're definitely going to connect you because he is very interested in this topic. And we really appreciate anybody who's got the academic credentials, who's out there having this conversation, because these are very important conversations. And again, like you said, it's not about bias. It's about let's get to the truth. Let's gather more data. On that note, Avi, can you go over again specifically what sort of instrumentation we should be using, where we should be looking, and what sort of specific folks in academia who should be helping with this process? Right. So
I split the study into two parts. One has to do with objects like Oumuamua that passed far from the Earth at a fraction of the distance of the sun from Earth. So for those, we can't really obtain an image by using the telescopes on Earth because they are too small for the distance. We can't resolve them. And so you're saying if we had noticed or we had in time seen Oumuamua, that we still wouldn't have been able to get the image that we were looking for. Is that what you're saying based on the technology that we have out there? Unless we sent a camera that intercepts its orbit. And by the way, we did that with the asteroid Bennu. We sent OSIRIS-REx, and not only that it took a picture of Bennu, it also landed on it. And you can see the dirt, you can see the rock, and the dust that was raised when it landed on Bennu. And it took a sample from Bennu, and we'll bring it back to Earth in 2023. So that's a remarkable success story of being able to not only photograph an object, but also land on it and bring material from it. And
right.
You can imagine doing the same for an interstellar object of interest. And what I call of interest is an object that doesn't have a cometary tail, doesn't look like a comet, but exhibits unusual properties that cannot allow it to be a typical asteroid, just a piece of rock. For example, if it gets pushed by reflecting sunlight, like Oumuamua might have been, and like 2020 ESO was, because we know we made that object. So if we see another object like Oumuamua with similar qualities, I think a photograph will settle the issue of whether it's natural, like some people suggested. They suggested maybe it's a hydrogen iceberg, a chunk of frozen hydrogen, or a chunk of frozen nitrogen, or a cloud of dust particles 100 times less dense than air, or some So these were the suggestions made. These are objects that we've never seen before. Nevertheless, they were proposed for the first interstellar object. We haven't seen such objects in the solar system from within the solar system. And the first object we see is of that nature. So,
Right.
I mean, obviously a photograph will tell us if it looks like a hydrogen or a nitrogen iceberg, or it looks like a piece of equipment, that we can tell. I call that space archaeology, which is basically looking for relics from other civilizations out in space, rather than looking for relics through archaeological digs on Earth. And by the way, we could also excavate the moon, look on the surface of the moon, because equipment from outside the solar system may have crashed on the surface of the moon. The moon doesn't have geological activity that will mix it up with the interior. It doesn't have an atmosphere that will burn it up as it approaches the moon. So, once we have a settlement on the moon, a sustainable base, we could start walking around and checking if there is any piece of equipment that we didn't send, that arrived there somehow. And the same about Mars, So these are things we can do. And also we can monitor any meteor that looks as if it came from outside the solar system, because if it's bigger than the size of a person, something will be left of it when it lands on the ground, and then we can put our hands on it. So that's another opportunity to look at an object that came from outside the solar system. All of these are related to astronomy. But then you have the issue of UAP, or unidentified objects in the atmosphere of Earth. These are objects hovering just above the Earth's surface, very different from the other type.
Right.
And here, what we need to do is, have cameras or potentially satellites looking at these objects and trying to figure out their nature. And this should be done in an open way through a scientific experiment where the instruments collecting the data are known to the public, and the data is open, and anyone can analyze it when it comes along. And let's figure out what these are.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that the United States government is allowing these videos to be declassified, revealing that they are real videos and that they are showing UAP and that they are still unidentified. That's fascinating. And the fact that they can't release more based on sensor data speaks to exactly what you're talking about. It's so critical. What do you make of the fact that, the government is full of incredible minds and incredible scientists, yet for some reason they're saying we don't know what these things are in various cases. What do you make of that?
Well, the key question is, are these objects real? Are they smudges on the cameras or some illusions, or real objects? If they are real objects, which you can pretty much verify by detecting them with multiple instruments. If you have an infrared camera and a radar system and an optical camera and multiple pilots seeing the same thing at the same place doing the same thing, then you can be quite confident that these are real objects, because otherwise only one instrument would have a malfunction.
Right.
And if you convince yourself that these are real objects, and you also see that they are doing things that cannot be explained by human-made technologies. And I should emphasize that, some people say maybe the Russians or the Chinese have technologies far superior to ours in the US. Well, that would be a major intelligence flow. If we figure this out, that other nations have technological capabilities way ahead of us, I think that this would be clear from the consumer market, because you can make a fortune on technologies that are far better than ours, or it will be apparent in the battlefield. I find it hard to believe that there would be technologies so much more advanced than ours that we don't know about, that are human-made. Okay, so if we summarize, if these objects are real and they are not human-made, then there are two possibilities that are left on the table. One, that they are produced by natural phenomena, that there is something that nature does that we haven't figured out until now. And the second is that they are extraterrestrial in origin. And my point is we can figure out the difference between these two explanations by getting more data.
Right. Absolutely. What do you make of NASA and Bill Nelson coming out and saying they want to join this study and figure out what this UAP and UFO phenomena is? Do you think that's something that they're going to be reaching out to academia as well, or do you think that's something that'll stay internal? Have you heard anything?
Well, I very much hope that the scientists will be engaged in this effort, and as I said before, I'm happy to help, and I very much salute this initiative of Bill Nelson to explore this subject scientifically, because I think scientific knowledge is really needed to interpret the nature of these objects, and as qualified as military personnel are or politicians are to deal with other issues, they do not have the scientific knowledge to figure out what these objects are. And that, therefore, the subject should move to the science community, and we should use scientific instruments to figure the nature of these objects. And I very much agree with Bill Nelson on this point, and I'm happy to help.
That's fantastic.
Kristen, did you have a question for Avi?
No, I'm
make
just
sure I'm not
absorbing.
stepping over you. Okay.
No.
So okay, again, a lot of questions. Other than it being a light sail, have there been any other things put on the table where you're like, yeah, that sounds good?
Well, so the only other interpretations that were put on the table are some natural origin of something that we've never seen before, as I mentioned. A chunk of frozen hydrogen, because then when the hydrogen evaporates, it's transparent and you wouldn't see the cometary tail. The problem with that idea is that hydrogen evaporates very quickly, so such an object would not survive the journey. We showed that in a scientific paper. And then there was a suggestion maybe it's a nitrogen iceberg that was chipped off a surface of a planet like Pluto around another star. And we showed in a follow-up paper that you just don't have enough nitrogen on all the Plutos that you might imagine. There is just not enough nitrogen in stars in the entire galaxy to make enough chips such that would explain the discovery of Oumuamua. And then there was a suggestion, maybe it's a cloud of dust particles, very loosely bound, 100 times less dense than air, sort of like a dust bunny that you find at home. And the problem with that is when it gets close to the sun, it will get heated by hundreds of degrees. And such a cloud, a very fluffy cloud that is pushed by reflecting sunlight, it would not have the material strength to maintain its integrity. And so each of these suggestions had some major challenge. And my point is simple. I don't ridicule these suggestions. I think they are interesting and we should examine them. But all I'm saying is if we imagine only things that we've never seen before, we should also leave on the table the possibility that this object was artificial.
Right.
And why not have a honest discussion about all these possibilities by getting more data rather than ridiculing one of the possibilities?
I think that's so fascinating that all of the explanations are theoretical, right? Including the extraterrestrial. So all of the other potential explanations for this are the objects we haven't actually seen, which is fascinating.
Right. So I noticed when you were discussing the UAP, how you said, if it's real. I would argue, just a little pushback here, again, we're just discussing, that they are real. I mean, we have picked them up on those instruments. The Navy has confirmed that. You've got pilots, more than 2 different witnesses from 2 different angles who've talked about it. We don't have the piece of the craft. We don't have the body or the entity or the machine that operates it. But we've picked these things up on instruments. We've picked them up on very sensitive satellite images. All this stuff is classified. But for all intensive purposes, I think personally, it's just speculation, but that this UAP report is going to verify exactly that. It's not Antarctican. It's not Italian. It's not Russian. It's not Chinese. It's a 100% unknown. What it is past that, we're not even going to comment, let alone say anything else. So what is it going to take for an Avi Loeb to say these objects are real? We need to get used to that idea. How far away are you from saying something like that? What kind of evidence would you need?
Right. So the evidence that was released on YouTube, the evidence that we saw, is not conclusive enough. But the point is, I do think that it's just the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned before, that most of the data cannot be released because it was taken by sensors that are classified. Okay, and if we were to release them to the public, then the quality of the sensors that the US is using to monitor its sky would be revealed, and that is not good for national security. So you don't want to release the data so that nobody would actually know what instruments are used to monitor our sky. But there are people, high-level officials, that had access to that data, and I listen to them, and I trust them. And for example, former President Barack Obama spoke about this as a serious matter. Former CIA directors, John Brennan and James Woolsey, spoke about them as something real. And so when I listen to those people that I trust, that had access to the classified data, then I get I get intrigued. I mean, it's not evidence that they are real, but it makes the case much more plausible because these are serious people. What would convince me that they are real is obviously getting my own data, because science is about reproducibility of results. And if there is something that is real, you should be able to reproduce it. You know, just for example, you know, there is this biblical story about Abraham that heard the voice of God telling him to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. And if Abraham had a cell phone, he could have pressed the voice memo up, or the voice of God, and made the case much more convincing. You know, but given that he didn't have the instruments, you know, we have to decide whether we believe eyewitness testimonies. And I think that, you know, I would be convinced when the data that is collected in the scientific way, it doesn't need to be me, just through a scientific experiment, through an open data collected by known instruments that are available for everyone to see. When that is done, then I will be definitely convinced. But I'm intrigued enough right now to do this experiment. And the other thing I should say is, when we talk about UFOs or UAP, it's a mixed bag. We have to keep that in mind, because you have a lot of reports that date 70 years back. Some of them were by people that just saw something unusual. And the point is, many of these reports may be related to, you know, military equipment that these people were not aware of, or to some mundane reasons. And there could have been something wrong with their cameras and all kinds of things. So I would say it's a mixed bag. So if the Pentagon says there are a few objects that appear to be real and we should take them seriously, that doesn't make all the reports from the past valid. We shouldn't conclude that, because most of the objects that were reported in the past didn't have very strong evidence in their favor. So I would say we have to treat one object at a time, and keep in mind that even if one object is extraterrestrial, that's enough to make the entire story extremely important for us as humans. You know, we don't need more than one object.
Right. Well, that's what I always say. It's, I mean, with a billion different stories out there, only one of them needs to be valid. Just one. Right. And it's hard to think that either all of these stories and data collected is just wrong or mistaken data. I just don't buy the odds in that. I know the odds of something coming here from another solar system is very small, just because of the energy it would take and all of the scientific reasons that people like Avi Loeb and Michio Kaku and Neil deGrasse Tyson lay out for us all the time. But I mean, it's just, we really want to have this discussion, and we need an Avi Loeb to say, yep, these things are real. You know, we need guys like you to come out, and I don't know where the data is going to come from. We talk about all the time. I mean, we did a political movement on my channel where it was to call your representatives and demand more transparency, more data. And then in this process, we also thought about, well, how cool would it be instead of spending $22 million on an ATIP program, why don't we give that $22 million grant to, I don't know, Harvard, MIT, these sky hubs that are starting to be built everywhere. Let the kids open source it. Let the data be collected publicly. And then we can go to Congress next year and say, hey, look, here's our data. Where's yours? And
that's exactly what I'm advocating for, what you said at the end. And I think the process can be transparent. And, we're in the 21st century. We shouldn't rely on politicians telling us the truth. We can figure it out ourselves.
Avi, you served in the Israeli army. We have the father of the Israeli space program, Jaime, who came out, I think, about a year ago and said that he believed that we were in communication. And I'm going to try not to laugh. Like, it's hard for me not to laugh when I say this, but he said that we were in communication with a galactic federation of extraterrestrials. What do you make of somebody who has such an impact and is such an incredible scientist?
I'm curious if you know him.
No, I don't know him. And
okay.
What I would say is, I pay attention only to evidence. And if I were a reporter and I would speak with him and he would make this statement, I would ask him to show me the proof, show me some piece of paper that indicates this or some other clue that just saying something doesn't make it real. There are some people that claim that they are Napoleon. And then when you ask them for their ID and you look at it and they are not Napoleon, but they keep insisting that they are Napoleon, you decide to put them in some particular location. And so my point is, just saying something is not enough. You need to back it up with evidence. And that's the way science is done. And it may well be that he has the evidence, he just cannot disclose it. Right. But as long as he doesn't provide the evidence, I wouldn't pay attention to it. As a reporter, I would never report about this story unless I saw some evidence.
Right. I think what's funny is I think he only said it once or twice. I think only one, and it was an Israeli newspaper that reported on it. This is not something that, like an Avi Loeb where he's doing, and I was going to ask you, just the first question was like, how many hours has Avi Loeb dedicated to talking about this? And I'm going to guess somewhere in the, 3,000 to 4,000 hour range. Like you've done so many interviews.
Yeah, well, over the past 5 months, I had of the order of 700 interviews. Basically, most of the days were from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Back to back. And it wasn't possible without the pandemic because if I had to go on book tours or on trips, it would waste a lot of time on this travel.
So you kind of lucked out, right? You didn't have to leave home, and you still got to promote it.
That's right. Well, I did leave home every morning at 5 a.m. Just for my morning jog.
There you go.
In the company of birds, ducks, rabbits, and wild turkeys, and I should say that I enjoy that very much.
Typical military man waking up at the butt crack of dawn to go run. Something I will never ever fathom doing.
Avi, so this idea of breaking into the mainstream with hypotheses that are outside of the mainstream. There are a lot of folks who are doing work with theoretical warp drives and things like this. I'm curious, and I know you're an astronomer and an astrophysicist, but I'm curious, to what extent are these things always going to be relegated to either capitalists or kind of mad scientists?
Well, you should keep in mind that two types of hypotheses. There are hypotheses that say, okay, we've seen something anomalous, something weird. Let's lay out all the possible explanations of it. And sometimes the explanations are outside the box, but they still follow the laws of physics, these explanations. In fact, they are using the laws of physics to come up and explain the phenomenon that you've seen. And there is another type, like the warp drive type that you just mentioned, where people say, okay, let's break the rules. Let's imagine that physics is incomplete and that there are deviations from the laws of physics as we know them. And I should say that would be even more revolutionary because, a slight violation of anything we know in the standard model of physics would earn you a Nobel Prize. So there was recently a lot of chatter about the magnetic moment of the muon deviating slightly from what theories predicted with some uncertainty, and that's not even clear that there is a deviation. And even that slight deviation, was extremely significant, and people talked about it. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that the standard model of physics seems to work extremely well, so much so that over the past few decades, we only confirmed things we know pretty much, and the deviations from the model were always sort of simple extensions of it. Like, for example, the neutrino could have a mass. I mean, that's not something completely outrageous, and things like that. And it's a tremendous success for the standard model of physics. And if you try to claim that maybe our understanding of space and time is incomplete, that's a major revolution, and you shouldn't take it lightly. So at first, I think we have an obligation to try and explain everything we see within the standard model of physics, and it works pretty well. I mean, there are things that do not work well, like, for example, we don't know what the dark matter is, most of the matter in the universe, and it could be that the law of gravity that is used to infer the existence of dark matter is not the correct description, that in fact there is a deviation from, there is a modification of gravity that accounts for the dark matter, and it's not really matter that we are missing, it's gravity that we don't understand fully. So things like that, I mean, there may well be something hiding that we haven't yet realized, but what I'm trying to say is we have an obligation as physicists to explain everything we see first using the laws of physics. And if someone tells you, oh, I've seen a UFO that behaves in a way that violates the laws of physics, that to me is a little too much, because what I would look for, if I were to do the experiment we were talking about, if I see an object moving faster than the speed of sound, for example, just like a supersonic jet, it must produce a shock wave in air. There must be a sonic boom associated with it. And one can look for it. And that would be confirmation that indeed there is a physical object moving in air faster than the speed of sound. And I would look for those things. A military person might not think about it.
Right.
When the object passes through water, I would look for the splash. I would look for side effects that confirm what we understand about physics. And if someone said, oh, it comes from another dimension and it's doing maneuvering in a way that you cannot describe, I would be very reluctant to adopt that approach, because so far we haven't seen such things anywhere else. So
do you think that the amount of money that's been spent to study string theory actually has that effect? I'm wondering to what effect people are interested in these multi-world theories and this ability to move interdimensionally, because science has been studying and trying to postulate things like string theory.
Well, the issue I have with extra dimensions or the multiverse or the string theory landscape is that the people that are engaged in these speculations, in these theories, do not put any skin in the game. They don't make predictions that are testable experimentally. And that has been the case for several decades now. And it's not at all clear that during their lifetime, there would be a prediction that an experiment can test. They would say, if the experiment gives me this answer, I know that string theory is right. If it gives me another answer, I know that string theory is wrong. They would never make any such prediction. Okay, and to me, that's sort of a betrayal of the tradition of physics. It's supposed to be a humbling experience where you learn from doing experiments, you learn what nature is, rather than say, I know what nature is, and I don't need experiments to tell me, and you use it as a sandbox to demonstrate that you're smart, that you can manipulate equations, do intellectual or mathematical gymnastics. That's not really what physics is about. It's not about showing that we are smart. It's more about trying to figure out nature. And, there was the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle that argued we're at the center of the world. He had a beautiful, sophisticated model where you had spheres centered at us. And that model was accepted for 1,000 years because it flattered the egos of a lot of people. But then Copernicus and Galileo demonstrated that the Earth moves around the sun, or argued that. And basically, they showed that his model is wrong. So as sophisticated as it was, that's not real. I mean, nature is under no contract to be sophisticated. You know, it could be simple. Oumuamua may be a technological relic, and that would change the future of humanity. You know, you don't need the equations of string theory to figure this out. It's just a simple fact that you have to figure out from data.
Ooh, well, I
so much like this idea that the beautiful, elegant mathematics and how that can pad the ego versus what is your number one job? It's to investigate the nature of reality.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing to keep in mind, we should be modest because our knowledge is just an island in an ocean of ignorance. So, you know, we're basically students of the universe. We need to collect data to guide us where, you know, we are born into this world like actors put on a stage without knowing what the play is about. And we tend to think that the play is about us. That's very flattering. But, you know, you look at the stage, it's huge, you know, the entire universe. And moreover, the play has been going on for 13.8 billion years since the Big Bang. Clearly, we just came at the end. It cannot be about us. And the best we can do is look for other actors and ask them what the play is about. But if we stay at our home and just close off the curtains and say, we don't want to look out, there are no neighbors out there, give me extraordinary evidence before I would even consider opening the curtain, then you would be convinced that there are no neighbors. But whether you have neighbors or not does not depend on whether you look through the window. That's the simple point that I'm making.
Well, as an actor and improviser, I could tell you could probably be a great theater teacher, Avi.
I think you could be a phenomenal Secretary of Education.
Oh, without a doubt. No, without a doubt.
We're exploring your next phase of life.
Next phase of join us for the next phase with Avi Loeb. So Avi, I got a question for you. If we could can bend space-time and go back to the childhood of Avi Loeb, or if you could give advice to a young 12-year-old kid right now, what direction of science would you push them towards to maybe get the best answers on this question?
On the question of whether we are alone or whether there is
on how to even get the data, like how to get the information, how to be the guy that could take the picture of Oumuamua or prove the existence that yes, we are not alone.
Well, it's relatively straightforward. First, you need to keep your childhood curiosity. You shouldn't surrender to how many likes you have on Twitter. That is your goal is not to be popular. Your goal is to figure out the truth. That's a very important point that a lot of adults do not understand. You know, and so that's point number one. And kids come with that naturally. You see, and then of course social media corrupts the youth because it teaches them to be in a groupthink mentality. And you know, if for example Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, you know, he argued through dialogues that you should criticize distinguished figures, and he was accused of corrupting the youth and was put in jail and was forced to drink poison because he didn't believe in the gods of the Athenian society. If he was today, he would have been cancelled on the Athenian social media.
Was he doing the earliest forms of satire, Socrates?
Well, yeah, he was basically asking questions and through dialogues trying to figure out the truth. And obviously, he was not always saying things that other people wanted to hear, and they forced him to drink poison. Now, today they would not do that, but they would cancel him. And my point is, independent thought is extremely precious for our future because that's the only way by which we can discover that what we believe in is incorrect. If you were to always subscribe to groupthink, then you will never figure out that you are wrong. And so that's point number one that I would mention to the kids. And point number two is we have the instruments, we have the technology to answer this question. It's just a question of will. It's a question of allowing people to openly discuss it without ridiculing them, without having a taboo on the subject. We can use our telescopes to search for technological signatures. For example, not just relics, we can look for industrial pollution in the atmospheres of planets. I wrote a paper about it 6 years ago. We can look for artificial light on the night side of a planet, city lights. And I wrote a paper about it 2 weeks ago. And we can look for light beams that are sweeping across our sky and creating flashes of light. And these light beams may be used to propel light sails or for other purposes. That is another approach. We can look for photovoltaic cells that are covering the day side of a planet, and we can find them through their reflectance that is different from rock. And then we can look for megastructures or swarms of satellites around planets. All of these things can be looked for if you're only willing to discuss the possibilities. And then young people, I believe, are willing. But when young people see the senior people ridiculing the subject, that is very damaging, because then they're worried about their job prospect and they're afraid of thinking outside the box. And I think that is the biggest damage of the ridicule. It's not so much that I care about what they say on what I talk about it, that's secondary. It's the message that is being given to other people watching it, especially the young people that are afraid. And they send me email messages saying, I really agree with what you're saying, but I worry about my career, and therefore I'm not speaking about it openly.
Right. Avi, what an absolute pleasure. We're running up at the hour mark. I know you've got a pretty tight schedule, so I know you got to get out of here. But I just wanted to thank you personally, from all of us here at the Singularity Lab, from all of our listeners who had the opportunity to ask you questions and get feedback from you. I hope you had a blast, and I hope you'll come back again soon.
Thank you so much for hosting me. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Avi. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Oh, man, it's Jamarl just missed him. You just missed him, Jamarl. Oh, man. He's got a tight schedule, Jamarl. You just missed him.
Yeah. Well, it was 8 o'clock, and I was here.
Yeah.
I was here.
I know.
Yeah, well,
And
but then you got up. You got up. And I was like, no. I was just about to bring you in.
Because nobody was addressing me. I was here alone. I was alienated. I was like, all right, man, they're doing this show.
You see, this is why we need to do more shows, so we could telepathically communicate. Because I was saying, all right, Jamarl's here. I'm just going to wait for a nice break, and then I'm going to introduce him and pop him in here and get the last question. And then you got up and you left, and I'm like, no. But you're right. It's on me. I should have said something in the private chat. I messed up. It's on me.
It's on us.
Look, I host
we'll get
the show,
back.
right? And it's like trying to do all this stuff at once is not necessarily the easiest. And then the moment that you see somebody walking, you're like, all right, he's here.
Yep, he's here.
All right, we got him. And then you get up and walk away and be like, oh, bastard. But at that point, all that stuff is happening at once, right? So how are you guys doing? Are you doing all right?
Yeah, man. How are you doing?
And I'm doing good. I actually feel good. Lost like 20 pounds. Just got back from Switzerland.
Yeah, man. I saw you traveling.
Wow.
Not bad.
Where did you lose it? Switzerland?
No. So we
baggage
like on a travel diet, right? You are eating like one meal a day, maybe one meal a day. You're doing tequila and cigarettes, and you're doing like saunas and that type of stuff, right? Because you're traveling. The funny part is all of us, the men were on travel duty, right? So it was like just men, just out there traveling. And of course, you end up at a coffee shop or a bar. And you're sitting there, you're sweating because it's hot. It's like 90 degrees. You're sweating, your shirt is open. There's a beer. I have tequila. I pull out a cigarette. I'm taking a smoke. My boss is like, hey, can I get one? It just feels right. You're just men. And they bring out a hamburger with a knife in it. And it's like, wow. This is so hardcore. And then they say, hey, what do you want to do tomorrow? And I'm like, what about a day spa? We can spend all day at the spa. We can get a massage. We can get a sauna. We can get rubbed down. And they're looking at me like, dude, have you lost your mind? So I went to the day spa. I had a phenomenal time. Facial, hour massage by a woman that looks like a supermodel.
I mean, Sweden.
Sweden. And no, this was in Milan. We went to Milan
even more exotic.
Even better.
Yeah.
It's like you guys are like, you're looking at me like it's unmanly to get rubbed down by a supermodel. Okay.
No.
Okay,
No,
fair
that's
enough.
the manliest thing I've heard all
That's
day.
the manliest thing
No,
ever,
no, no,
right?
no.
That's
No,
right.
I was actually looking into Milan
I'm not
last night.
ashamed.
My great grandfather was born in Italy, and so I'm looking into Italian citizenship. And
Nice.
so and it's supposedly it's so easy. I had no idea how easy it was to get Italian citizenship if you're a
Italian.
great grandson or grandson. Yeah, so it's crazy.
Very
Well,
interesting.
I did see it was either a TikTok or your tweets, Jamal.
Oh, yeah, I was
man,
tweeting out
you had
the,
the open
the-
shirt, you were smoking, you were checking out parades. I'm like, look at this maniac. I love it.
Well, I was at the
You were
summit, right?
vacationing, baby.
No, man, that was
So
work.
can we make sure? Can we make sure everybody knows who Jamal is first of all?
Oh, my bad, my
So
bad. I
Jamal-
came here talking, my bad.
Jamal is a political analyst and host of Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C., 105.5 FM, and the YouTube channel by the same name, Jamal Thomas. It's amazing to have you here. I can't wait to dig into this topic. I can't wait to dig into some UAP conversation and what we're expecting this Friday coming from the 180-day report. We've also got Graham Goche, the greatest actor you've never known. He is best known for his role as UNN Commander Stenson on the critically acclaimed sci-fi television series, The Expanse. Welcome, Graham.
Oh. Hi, guys.
What's happening,
I
Graham?
just sat there. Whew, what timing?
Ooh, that connection
you got a buddy
looks
there, Jamal?
great.
You got a
How's it going,
friend?
man? Doing all right?
Good. Good to see you. Why do you have me on when you have him? I'd rather just sit and listen to him all night.
What? Don't do that.
You can,
He's
you
so
can,
good.
you
Oh,
can.
he's got such great opinions.
Just gotta-
man.
you
I
got-
love
you gotta-
listening to you.
You got a front live stream seat to just sit back and listen to the smooth sounds of Jamal Thomas.
Hey, everybody.
You guys are radically kind.
Welcome, Graham. So I'm stoked to get everybody's thoughts here coming out. Lou stayed up last night and was listening to a podcast, and Tim McMillan was on the podcast. And one of the things that Tim McMillan said was we should expect about a 78-page report coming to Congress, of 4 of which would be unredacted or for public consumption. I have no idea whether or not this is true, but I'd love to hear what you guys have heard around the rumor mill water cooler.
Well, I'll just say, just FYI, McMillan also, like, I tweeted that and it caused a shitstorm. Like, everybody's like, wait a second, McMillan said that there wasn't going to be a report until July. And then this and this. And I'm like, Jesus, dude, this guy is doing radio shows at 5 a.m. Relax, okay? Who cares if it's the 25th versus the 1st of July? The point of the bottom line point was it's going to be a 70-something page report with about 3 or 4% of it seen. Like, it's like that's what, just set your expectations there is what the point of the tweet was. But then it went to crazy town
Because
real
people give
quick.
him shit. People give him shit because 6 months ago he said, "Don't expect it to come out on time." It's not
6
gonna come out on
months
time."
ago.
I know, but here's my point.
Yeah.
Everything has changed since then.
Right.
Everything has changed. The
Well,
amount of media
you
coverage
want to
we're
know why,
getting-
Michael? Because it was 6 months ago, bro. Like, it was 6 months ago. Give the guy some goddamn
Agreed.
slack.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
Relax.
Yeah, you got to give him some leeway, man. Look, it's a UFO report. Everybody's been waiting for it. Everybody is kind of like antsy, especially in the UFO community. It's like, give me the report. Where's the report? Where's the report? You said it was supposed to be here in 6 months. It's that stuff, right? And so it's fair enough. I mean, look, coming from the political space, I'm used to people acting that way. Like, with how do you explain it? Like, how dare you? How dare you? And it's like, oh, calm down. It's not that important. Just calm down. It's okay.
Dude, even if it's wrong, even if it's wrong or different, 6 months ago, dude.
You missed it by like a couple of days.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Well, didn't they say that there was going to be a full report to Congress, right? And then that would contain top secret material.
Yeah.
And a separate report that would be released to the public.
Right.
Didn't they say that?
Yes.
So that would contain material that is not redacted. So
But
those
they-
4 pages that you say are going to be from the briefing that is top secret, 4 pages will be unredacted.
Right.
That's all we're going to get.
Of the 78.
About 4 pages. It could be 5.
Right. But then
Well,
isn't there
Yeah.
an
And
amended
McMillan
report
said
that
he
is
was-
meant for the public, though?
Yeah, the
that
6
might be
page.
great.
This,
pages. Yeah, there might be
this-
6
Well,
pages.
separate from the pages that are redacted from the report that Congress gets.
there's 2 reports. One's classified for Congress. The other one is for the public.
Right.
The very tiny one is what the public's going to get.
Right.
It could be, like I said, again, it's 4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages, somewhere around there. It's
What-
not going to be very thick.
What sort of trouble does a member of Congress get in if they share what they're not supposed to?
So that's an interesting
great
thing that
question.
you brought up. Daniel Ellsberg. Let's go back to Daniel Ellsberg for the moment. We have Sheenahan associated with Lou Elizondo on this. Well, if you remember, back in the Pentagon Papers, they were trying to put Ellsberg in prison. Ellsberg basically released information that the U.S. government had been bombing in countries for telling the public it was doing so illegally. And so, what's his name? Oh, what is his name? Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel goes out onto the congressional floor and
Mike
reads
Gravel.
it.
Mike Gravel.
Right.
Okay.
Gravel, right. Goes out and reads it in the congressional floor. And members of Congress have a certain level of protection in doing that. And so the catch becomes, if a member of Congress went out there and read that, what happens? I got to be honest, I'm not sure. I don't think anything. Because Ellsberg basically was cut loose after that. I mean, how can you prosecute the guy when Gravel just went out here and read the report? I mean, read the Pentagon files. So that's a good question. I mean, if it's still the same rule set, and I think it is. Members of Congress have to have a certain amount of leeway to be able to do that stuff on the House floor. So it's this thing. They're almost protected by it. So I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, somebody definitely correct me on this. But if, as far as I know, nothing.
Because I mean, there are definitely some wild cards in there right now.
Yeah,
that you wouldn't be surprised to see him do something. Yeah,
Wouldn't be shocked at all. Like, look at these vehicles.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
look at the dead bodies of aliens. Like, it's just some insane stuff, right?
But hold on a second, though, Jamal.
Go for it.
I was gonna say, like, I think there is a limit. Like,
There has to
obviously,
be.
there has to be, right? Because if this, I mean, I'm assuming in this report there might be some photos, maybe even video.
Right.
And if they released or leaked a video or played it on the floor of Congress, and that video or that collection of that data was insanely sensitive.
Yes.
I just don't know what the repercussions would be. Would he be arrested? Would he be kicked out of Congress?
This might be one of those
This is a legal question, right?
Yeah, that's a legal question. And it might be a loophole. Like, that's what I mean for the Daniel Ellsberg stuff. They were trying to put Ellsberg in prison.
Right.
And if it wasn't like, why was Gravel protected on the congressional floor? It's a quirk of the job. So I don't know, Lou. I mean, honestly, this is a legal question.
Would there be any punishment that you would receive from, like, breaking your clearance, your top secret clearance?
That's
you
interesting.
Have to swear an oath to it.
That's interesting, but I'm not sure. Like, does Congress implicitly have top secret clearance?
That's a good question.
Well,
I think it depends on the committee, right?
Have top secret clearance.
It would depend. It probably does depend on the committee that they're on, what sort of clearance level they get. I'm not certain. I'd really like to get some more information on this because that's a really interesting point. And there's also a rumor swirling around. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but that the entire classified report was leaked to the New York Times.
I heard that.
And
I saw that.
And they're working on a bombshell story. You heard that too?
I saw that. It was Washington Post and the New York Times.
And
that would be wild.
And
remember the Pentagon Papers? I mean, this was a story the New York Times broke because those classified documents were taken out of the Pentagon and delivered to the Times, and they reported on it. And so it's dicey. It's legally dicey, but it could happen.
That's what I mean.
Just to avoid all that issues, couldn't they just leak it?
There's that. You
know, like, that's what I think.
Who catches who, though? Who leaks it?
Well, that's the thing. It's a leak. Who knows? You know, like, that's sort of the fun about it. It's like, was it Rubio? Was it Warner? You know?
Saying, if there's anything juicy in this report, there is no way they're not going to leak that report. Like, there's like, how do you keep it? Like, do you, like, because one or two things is going to happen. Either members of Congress, because this is what I think happens when because you guys were around, you heard this, where they were saying that people were reaching out from intelligence to try to get, who said this? That intelligence reached out to them to try to help them release information on the UFO stuff. Do you guys remember this? I don't remember who the person was, but it's somebody that we all know. That was like, whoa, really? If that's true, then the catch becomes, okay, well, was he supposed to? What's the philosopher name? What's the philosopher name? He's a philosopher.
Socrates, Aristotle.
No.
Galileo.
He's now.
Sam Harris. Sam Harris. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now Sam Harris comes out and says, "Well, they were reaching out to me to try to get me to release this information, and go so far as to say there was supposed to be this kind of like report or something like that, or some kind of call." And you're like, "Whoa, were you supposed to tell that?" First question, and the second question is, who else are they reaching out to in order to get the information out?
So we just had Avi Loeb here, and he didn't say he's been reached out to.
Right, they didn't reach out to Avi Loeb. That's my point. Though. There's probably a lot of influencers, a lot of YouTube influencers, a lot of people who are just think of Operation Mockingbird. They were doing college professors. They were doing anybody that might have had any level of influence to try to get the stuff out. So if something like that is happening here, there may be people who are functioning who are not telling you that they're functioning because of this. And by the way, you don't even need to threaten them. If you contact Sam Harris and say, Sam Harris, I need you to do something for national security. The world is at stake, Sam, and there's aliens potentially, Sam, and we need to get this information out to the public. You can't say anything, Sam. You may not even have to threaten them. You might just need to say, Sam, can we get your help on this? And Sam, if he's like any other person who doesn't want to run afoul and believe I'm part of something larger and the government needs me, will say, okay.
Well, couldn't it be even simpler than that? Couldn't it just be, look, Sam, we don't know how to talk about this. Yeah. And here's the information we have. We don't know what it is. Yeah. We just don't have any clue, but they're real. They're 100% tangible objects. And we need folks like you. I think they're going to reach out to the rock stars of science: Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku, Bill Nye the freaking science guy,
Mick
like
West.
the Mick. Well, man, I don't know about Mick. I mean, he's not a rock star of science. You know, he's. I mean, we love Mick, but he's not a scientist. He was on the show last night. Awesome show. But you know what I mean? Like, they're going to go out to the people who, you know, when they go to CNN, we always bring on Neil Tyson. When we go to ABC, it's always a Michio Kaku. You know, people who break the complex into simple things. And I think that's what they're going to do. Because
Sam is one of those guys.
Well, first of all, nobody trusts the government. So it can't come from them. It's got to come from a Sam Harris. It's got to come from an Ezra Klein or the New Yorker before people take it.
Who don't initially, let's say, agree or who have something to lose in putting out, meaning this person is coming out and this person is risking something and putting this out. And Sam Harris, I've never heard Sam Harris talk about aliens outside of
he's been
critical. He's been very critical.
He's critical. That's my point.
Yeah,
in that video,
he's been critical of experiencers. He's been critical about sightings. He's been critical about all of it.
Precisely my point. It was this: they put a chip in his head. He was complete 180. Like, listen to the interview; it's astonishing. Like, I'm sitting there, like, whoa.
Well, but don't you think? But don't you think also it's because Sam Harris spread the New Yorkers? Sam Harris heard Ezra Klein. Sam Harris heard all of these elitist sort of media places where Sam Harris mingles with his martini drinking buddies, and they all listen to the same stuff, and they're getting their NPR hit, and it's like, oh shit, something's happening. And then on top of that, somebody from the government knocks on his door, is like, hey, Sam Harris, we really need your help.
Latter.
You think it's the latter?
From the standpoint of impact, the latter.
The latter.
Like,
I agree.
If it was me and somebody from the government, like, think of Tom DeLonge. Think of the effect it had on Tom DeLonge. Like, Tom DeLonge, I got read in, and he believes he knows something that other people don't necessarily know. Why? Because he got read in. The government told him so. It's that. Right. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you, Lou, that your people in your sandbox, those are the people you basically trust and you give this kind of deference to. And so it's like, all right, these people are talking about it. These people on some level agree with it. Maybe there's a there that I can see that, right? Yeah. But I think it's something else when you get somebody, a credible back channel from the government saying, hey, we need to do this. Now, we have no idea how much they told Sam Harris. Like, we don't know how many details he has. We don't know if they told him like more information about maybe the report or things that might have been outside of the report. We have no idea what he knows. The only thing he knows, somebody contacted him. We don't even know if the fact that he mentioned that contact was part of the fact that he got contacted
Right.
for.
Right.
We don't even know that.
Well, and didn't he say that they were not current members of the CIA, that they were retired members of the
Right,
CIA?
they were back channels. That's right,
So
they were back channels.
What does that even mean?
It means
Right.
that there's no such thing as a former member of the CIA. That's what it means.
That's a good
Oh,
point.
I mean, serious.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I mean,
but
dead
here,
serious.
well, here's the
I-
thing. It's something that Mick pointed out on our show last night, and he's right. There's no current, but other than the senators, but there's no current people of power. Like, there's not a CIA director who has a job right now who's talking about it.
Right.
These are all former government of like high level officials. Why do you think that is? What's going on?
Wait a
there?
second. What about Bill Nelson? Bill Nelson's currently
But Bill Nelson is part of NASA. He's not a Congress member anymore. He doesn't
government.
work.
But
He's
NASA
leading
has
a government
power.
agency.
He was head of
Yeah,
the
I mean,
intelligence
NASA is
committee
a
at one
major
time, wasn't
government
he?
agency on this front. I mean, we're talking about something that literally explores space.
Yeah, well,
Like, how
Graham's right. Bill Nelson was on the Senate Intelligence Committee as well.
Yes, he was.
But he's no longer a part of Congress.
I know, but he's head of NASA.
Yeah, and
I mean,
Yeah.
like, think
been
of the
briefed on
research
it.
capability of that. For example, satellites. Right
Yeah.
now, NASA has been doing research looking at the world's weather systems to try to nail down and get more accurate readings about climate change. NASA is a scientific organization by definition. I mean, the fact that they're exploring space, the technology, the engineering, the fact, even when they send astronauts to other country or other worlds, they're doing science. They're not just, just working on a figure. And so the idea that NASA, this preeminent space agency, has said, we're going to study UFOs. That's a big deal. That's a massive deal.
I know, but it's not like NASA gets in front of Congress every year and it's like, here's the NASA report.
No,
it's
that's
like,
true. However,
know?
NASA has, any time that Nelson wants to come out and give any kind of commentary or press conference, there will be all sorts of media there to listen to him.
without a doubt. That's the
his
plus
impact.
about it. No,
Yeah.
no, for sure. Look, I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact. I'm just saying it doesn't really have to report to anybody. It's not.
Right.
He's not a CIA director. He's not a Department of Defense guy. He's just the head of NASA, which I mean is a big
Just
deal.
the head of NASA.
Just
They
the head
may
of
already
NASA. But I'm
have
saying
a lot of
it's.
data to surf
What
through, though.
do you got, Graham? I'm sorry. What'd you say?
NASA may already have a lot of data to surf through. They've been up in space
too.
for how many years?
Yeah.
Right? They got cameras pointing in all directions.
all
They always cut the
directions.
feed whenever something.
And that's the other part. So you've heard
right?
Greer make
That's
that
a good
argument.
question.
Yeah, you've heard Greer make that argument, saying that bringing on the interviewer, saying, "Look, we scrub data, and the guy, I can't think of the guy's name, the one that got arrested, almost locked up, and exported to the United States.
Gary McKinnon.
Yeah, where he was like, yeah, I just kind of was stumbling in NASA's files, and I would blow him off if it wasn't for the fact they were trying to extradite him to the United States for digging into NASA's files.
But
Isn't
he
it the one
was
that
digging.
found
He
the
was digging
secret
into other
space
files
program?
though too, right?
Yeah,
He found the secret space program, but he also was digging in a whole bunch of other stuff. He said that the secret space program was like 20 pages out of all the shit he looked at.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and also just the process of how he did it was insane. It was literally like all of these passwords where people were just like, these government employees were just
Password.
like 1, 2,
Password
3,
one.
4 password, like the simplest shit to log onto their government computer. And Gary McKinnon comes in and he's like,
1111.
I love his defense too. His defense is like he had autism or something like that. And they're like, you didn't mean it.
I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that was wrong. If you don't close the door, is it illegal to open the door?
Well, you make a good point, Graham, with the uncut feeds. Like, I think that should be question number 1 for Bill Nelson. Hey, can you guarantee you guys will never cut a feed? Unless, of course, it's an emergency disaster situation. But when weird things come into the camera, could we get your promise not to cut the feeds anymore?
Well, not
because
just-
that's data. That's
Not
data
just
that
that,
everyone can look
the
at.
feeds,
And have a separate
they could
feed.
be to us. We don't
But
know
are
if they
we
cut
going
us.
in all directions.
They're still gathering the data, right? It's
Yeah,
not as
right.
if they're cutting. It's not as if they're not gathering the data. They're just cutting the
Right.
public feed,
They're
right?
just cutting
Right.
public feed.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess the question would be,
We're not
what
getting
are
the
the
data.
anomalous findings that you guys had that you guys haven't shown?
Right.
I mean, that's the most basic question in the world. Are there anomalous findings that you guys had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Can the public see, going down that line of thing? I mean, especially since there's been all sorts of talk that NASA does have that information. I think it's perfectly
Right.
legitimate question to ask. Because we're
And what's
making the argument.
compartmentalized. What do you guys think is compartmentalized within NASA? I mean, obviously, Bill Nelson is the leader now of NASA, and he has the ability to gather all the data he wants in NASA. But the question is, are there parts of NASA that are under NSA control, or are there parts of NASA that?
Yeah, I'm
have-
curious.
Probably.
I'm curious to
Probably.
know what percentage of NASA is actually public.
Yes, that's
Right.
a really interesting question.
You know,
Right.
like
Experiments and packages that go up to the space station are sometimes top secret. So
oh,
I've heard.
without a doubt. No, there's always some army tech or military tech that they're always trying out there. But I am curious because they do present themselves as, we're NASA, we're here for the public, we're here to explore space on your behalf, but we're not going to show you shit. You know, like it's like, whoa, wait a
They never
second.
showed anything because from
Well, they
their
do
model,
show us
there's
some
nothing here.
stuff.
Yeah, from their model, there's nothing here. I mean, from scientists' perspective. Well, you were low. I was loving that conversation riding over here, and I was like, must drive faster. Must drive faster. Could not get. It's like, fuck, man. There was a fascinating conversation. He was like, because he made a point of like, look, on an order of magnitude, it's far weirder when something breaks the standard model. Okay, fair enough. And on some level, I would think the scientists have to assume that their model is incomplete. They haven't even necessarily matched quantum physics and gravity yet, right? So there's something there that you guys don't know, that you guys have to accept that you don't know.
And he kind of avoided that a little bit. I was like, and I didn't quite get to it. I'm like, well, but wait a second. Why is Michio Kaku, looking for this theory of everything? Why can we not, take Newtonian physics and quantum physics and match them up? There's something missing.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about do you remember when you were in class as a kid and the teacher explained that the periodic table was missing parts because and some kids are like, but why?
You're like,
I do
know
think there's a fair point where he's like, look, it's not that we're that we know everything. It's that we have to put what we don't know against what we do, because that's how you find out what's wrong, right? It's like, because look, I get annoyed at Mick West greatly because I think Mick West. Okay, I'm not gonna.
You're going to make a bashing.
I guess I'm saying, for scientists though, these guys have this kind of, it's a weird bias in the opposite direction. It's like, all right, our job is to figure out reality, et cetera, et cetera. But I've invited scientists, physicists on my show from MIT, and they have declined to come on for the UFO topic. Like, oh, that's bogus. Okay, well, you have some explaining to do. Loeb, even him, you have explaining to do. Meaning, you need to explain the observable phenomena that people are seeing. I heard the conversation. You said it, Mike. You're like, look, it's not about what people feel. It's about physical experience. It's about experience. All right? There are things in our sky that is doing things that is phenomenal that our pilots can't explain. And he's like, well, pilots may not be looking for physical effects. Well, no. There were pilots who said it went past the speed barrier without a sonic boom. So that's not something... they were looking for that stuff. They are going to see these kind of weird physical effects, especially if they're looking at this stuff on video and it's not just the pilot looking at it. If the pilot is in the air and observing stuff, more likely than not, that stuff is being videotaped on some level, or they're being surveilled on some level. There has to be data associated with it. The thing for science, you need to explain that stuff. It's not enough to say, oh, it's not real. Bogus. You're a conspiracy theorist, buddy. If you're going to make that argument, it's there to it. Now,
well, thank God we have somebody like Avi who's willing to stand up and say, no, let's get more data. Let's get out there. Obviously, we have sensors that we can't share based on military purposes, but we can do that. He's like, we can go to the store and buy this shit. Like, we can get out there and start studying this stuff ourselves. And then you've got, Neil deGrasse Tyson just shitting on the topic. Yeah. That's not scientific inquiry. That's my point. That's bias. That's ego.
That's ego, that's bias, that's their training on some level. Because in their training, this is impossible because our training says it's impossible. It's nonsense. You need to explain the observable phenomena in the sky. I don't care about your training. I don't care about what you think you know. I don't care about your standard model. I don't care about any of that stuff. There's observable phenomena that you need to explain, period. That's what science is, right? Explaining and describing your natural world.
I just want to slap him in the face and just say, get curious. Just be curious.
Get curious.
Right. What? We're not asking you to put a label on it. Just ask the questions.
Nobody is saying go out there and
watch your
scream
TV
aliens
series,
are here. What we're asking you to do is recognize that there's something that's there that is unknown that needs to be investigated, and the investigative function on this planet is science. Do your job. Do your job. Like, it's not enough for them to be like, oh, it's not real. Oh, it's swamp gas. That it puts me in mind of the psychologist who was on the airplane who saw a UFO, and everybody come down and they're like, hey, wow, that was an amazing UFO. And they ask the psychologist, he's like, oh, I didn't look because I don't believe in UFOs. It's like, dude, are you serious?
Yeah. Well, I want Neil deGrasse Tyson, just read a book. Like, how many books have you read on the UAP topic, Mr. Tyson?
0. He has his physics books. That's all you need. He has his model of the world from his physics books. That's what he needs.
No, it's insulting.
Yeah, tell him to read something like Above Top Secret or Flying Saucers Are Real by Kehoe, you know?
Hell, look at the other physicist. What's his name? The one who was investigating Roswell. I can't think of his name right now. He just passed. Stanton Friedman.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's another physicist for you. Friedman thought Bob Lazar was full of shit. So if you need somebody who has a little gump who's willing to say, that guy's full of it, there's your guy. Read that book.
Yeah, no, that's a great book.
There are other hard-nosed scientists that if you need to find people in your community that you can go
J. Allen Hynek was he was an astronomer, and he also has a skeptic, but he also has patents that NASA still uses to this day. Yes. Like, he was a brilliant man, and he changed his tune on this.
After so it's just like information and the data.
Right. After years.
Where are you, Neil? Come on, deGrasse.
Yeah,
where
for real. Where are you, Neil? Like, instead of where are you, Mrs. Robinson? It should be where are you, Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Where are you?
Yeah, I mean, no, dude, you're right, dude. I still am. I'm a fan of Neil.
I love Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I just wish he would just stop. Just stop. Why? Just get curious. He's a walking contradiction. He's always telling people to be curious. He's always telling people to question reality, to question the facts. Make sure that, also realizing at the same time that your brain makes mistakes. It remembers things wrong all the time. He was one of the people that walked me off the full bore rabbit hole of UFOs.
Really?
Especially, when he started throwing around analogies like anthills, like why, the aliens coming here.
Oh, wait. Before you go to that, so you were in the camp of aliens are eating babies.
Like I wasn't that hardcore. I wasn't aliens are being babies, but like
I'm being hyperbolic.
Yeah.
When I got into the community, or when I got into this, I started from the New Age part. I started from this part of like spirit guides and stuff like that when I was like 18 and 19, trying to figure out reality.
That's where I started too with the spirituality.
I didn't start from a spiritual. I didn't start from a spiritual start.
And so eventually I got to the UFO part, and I had this level of interest that freaked me out, that freaked my wife out, where I had this thing of like, I need to know what's real. I need to know what's real. And at a certain point, I was reading like the aliens are eating baby stuff. I was looking at lectures. I was looking at all that stuff. Like, I took all of it in, and I was like, all right, you know what? If that's true, that's problematic to say the least. But these people are nuts. And it was because it was some of the stuff that they were saying. Like, I came from a different dimension, and I when I got to this dimension, I was like, okay. Yeah. All right.
Well, when I say, I mean, look, I got into it. It wasn't a spiritual aspect for me. It was a nuts and bolts. It was a Bob Lazar. I started with Bob Lazar, and then I got into, the MJ-12 documents, and then I got into, I'm forgetting his name, who had all those amazing UFO pictures with the one arm.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
That's
what is his name?
Yeah, from Switzerland. Yeah, I'm forgetting his name.
George,
I'm sure somebody will put it in the chat. I started from a nuts and bolts aspect, and then when I had my sighting, I saw shape. I saw, not rivets, but points where things connected. And Billy Meyer, that's it.
Billy Meyer.
And so, like, when Neil came along and started giving me these analogies, like the anthill one is the one that sticks out to me. Yeah. It's the equivalent of a 40-year-old man, me, a 40-year-old man walking down the street. I see an anthill and stopping and getting to the queen and going, I'm here to help you, or whatever you're going to say to them. It's absurd. It's an absurd thought. But then I started thinking, and that backed me off big time. that got me to start thinking more rationally about it.
Yeah.
So I thank him for that. But here's where my evolution of this discussion went to. And that is, well, Neil, I'm going to push you back on this because I think you're right. A 40-year-old walking down the sidewalk would have zero interest in an ant colony. But if you had a, say, I don't know, 9-year-old with a magnifying glass.
Dude, I said that the first interview I had with Avi, I asked him that question, and he was like, well, I guess, yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying he's going to interact with that colony, and it's not going to be in a nice way.
Yeah.
So what from a galactic maturity standpoint, maybe some of these things are that 12-year-old version of what we're dealing with, whereas the more sophisticated. I mean, look, it just makes sense.
Think about us.
That's a really good analogy, but if we were walking down the street and we saw ants starting to do things that we do, like driving cars and things like that, then we might start trying to.
Well, but look at what we do.
Here we are, and we're moving out into space, and we're blowing up atom bombs.
Well, right there, and I asked you, Elizondo,
and they're out there going, something's going on here.
You
should look into it.
If we leave this planet,
that's a good point.
Advanced technology and everything else, whatever's out there should be very concerned. And that's you're talking about the ant colony analogy. I mean, that's not even a 9-year-old. That's somebody with very specific intention that doesn't quite realize or have a shadow self in regards to their actions, if that makes sense. Meaning, we could go to a planet and say, hey, we're here to help, we're here to be friends and everything else, and we would rape that planet blind, while simultaneously saying we're here to deliver freedom. Meaning, the shadow self is so strong in the way that we engage our behavior that it's like, yeah, we're going to do what we want, but we're going to code it in these kind of terms and everything else. That's terrifying. Like,
it's almost like the corporation that takes over an avatar.
Yeah,
like we're here for good, but really we're raping everything.
But they were very clear that their intention was to steal and take and everything else. I'm talking about this notion that we're free.
But was it? I mean, they put people in avatars to convince them to even talk. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there was the face of the corporation was like, we're here for good.
Yes,
we're here for humanity, to bring these species together behind the scenes, and not very deep behind the scenes. It was, no, we're here to fucking tear that tree out and get what's underneath it. You know?
1,000%, yes. Agree. I mean, I guess my thing is, if we act this way here, what are we going to act like in space? Right. And I think that would be a great worry and concern of humanity with all sorts of magnificent technology.
Well, this is why I always go back to the first contact analogy, right? And the reason that we make first contact with the Klingons in Star Trek is because we get warp technology, which gives us the ability to actually become a threat. Right. And so to your point earlier about the nuclear sites, and now that we have these nuclear capabilities, and to Graham's point about, now the ants are making cities and atom bombs. Well, now we're a lot more interesting to maybe the galactic passerby.
Well, yeah, and what Graham was saying, I mean, could you imagine? I mean, I think of us as this ant colony, right? And he's like, well, imagine the ant colony driving cars and flying, right? Now, imagine that ant colony launched its version of a nuclear weapon, and maybe it killed 2 or 3 people outside of the colony, and they had no clue.
No clue.
Right?
I mean, the ramifications of what we're doing on this planet may have larger implications in the universe, and we have no idea.
And maybe that's what happened when we started setting off nuclear weapons in space.
I said Klingons instead of Vulcans, and everybody's like, "Oh my god!"
Everyone went crazy. Oh boy!
Humanity got to a fight.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah. I'm not a Trekkie whatsoever.
You're a Trekkie.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine if a nuclear weapon is the thing that maybe ripped something in space and time and possibly caused some destruction in another part of this realm that we just can't see yet?
Yeah, we just can't fathom.
On the quantum level.
Don't believe exists, etc. I mean, for God's sake, our overt perspective was we were the only ones in the entire universe. Think how weird that is. If you think about that, if you think of all of the planets, all of the grains of sand, all of the universe, all that stuff, and it's like, we, humanity, is the only thing here. And it's like, why do you think that? Because, and you have to invoke God or something, in order to even make that work, right? Or science likes to say, oh, well, everybody has died out, just kind of off the top of their heads. Astonishing.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why they think that. I don't even know why they believe that. And life rolls in volcanic pits, for God's sake. So it's like, if on Earth, you have life that even grows in volcanic pits, where it's like life or whatever that is that tries to assert, I don't know, consciousness or some level of
Growth.
something beyond its unnatural nature, whatever else. That seems to take place everywhere. That doesn't seem to be something that's like, oh, we just need the perfect conditions for it. If you have a volcanic pit,
we found microbial life on the outside of the ISS, right?
Yes.
So
right. It just seems like that's something that life does. And so, I think it's weird to come along with this notion of, oh, it's just here on Earth. Oh, I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Yeah,
I don't even know what anybody else.
The question has always been about the Fermi paradox, right? It's always been about whether or not you can move through vast amounts of space and actually get to the other side. And we were talking about this with Avi earlier about warp drives and FTL travel and things like that. And he's like, I'm not willing to go there. But I mean, there's, scientists are doing studies on wormholes. I mean, there's potential to move outside and to bend and fold space. So I don't think these things are so far outside of fathomability as a lot of physicists might imagine.
No, it's not that. It's Avi has his own, I would wager Michio Kaku is probably similar too. Kaku is probably very curious about this stuff, and probably if you just got a few beers in him, got a few shots of tequila in him,
you don't even need that, dude. Cat talks about it quite a bit.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, if you ask him, yeah. It's just where he goes. He always goes to what I recommend when people get abducted is to bring back a piece of the ship.
An ashtray, he says.
I always
bring back an ashtray.
He said
I always go, yes,
all the time.
Yeah, he's like, bring back an ashtray. Try a toothbrush, dude.
Like at one point,
it's absurd.
I would tell you one of my abduction dreams that I've had. During this time, I was trying to contact aliens because it wasn't enough for me to be like, okay, I want to read about this. What's real? I care about what's real, and I care about what's real, even if it's subjective to me.
So did you experiment with like CE5, or was this?
Yeah, because my thought was starting in the spirituality thing first. What you realize is that UFO literature and spirituality literature are 1-to-1. They are, and that makes people uncomfortable. But it's true. If you're looking at out-of-body experiences and you're looking at the abduction phenomena, that stuff is almost a 1-to-1. Some people may have physical experiences with it, fair enough. But I'm just saying, I don't know about the physical experience. I just know reading and having absorbed both, shocked at how close they were. So for my assessment, it was like, all right, if the spirit guide connection thing worked, what if it's something similar in regards to connecting with like UFOs or something like that? What if the process is very similar in regards to involving consciousness in order to make this work? And so the first time around for the spirit guide stuff, I had a fear hurdle that I had to overcome. I realized that if this works, that means that your reality is fundamentally changed the moment that you encounter something. Mm-hmm. And that freaked me out like nobody's business. Like I couldn't even I would get into the meditative state and I would break and like, okay, yeah, screw that. I'm not doing that. like it took months to get to the point of like, all right, just let it happen, see what happens. That for the UFO stuff, I thought maybe it's something similar, whether it works or not. Yeah, who knows? Just try it. If the worst comes to worst, take it at its own standard to see whether it works. If it doesn't work, then so what? You just tried it anyway. You give it the thing. So that's what I tried. I was doing the meditation stuff. I was doing at the time I was also doing remote viewing and stuff like that. But I remember my wife one day told me, she's like, babe, just keep in mind there are 2 of us in this house. I was like, okay. Like, it's not that I believe that you're going to be abducted. It's not that I believe anything is going to take place like a contact. However, on the off chance that it does,
you must have the most patient, compassionate, loving wife.
I know, right? Like, because I'm like, honestly, it's.
I mean, let's be honest. You led with getting rubbed down by a hot Swedish model.
It's
like, whoa, what a cool wife.
But I had a lot of weird phenomena associated with during this time, including pictures, which was very weird that I didn't see when I was there, but pictures. There was this other thing of we saw sightings for the first time where there was like these ships, so she was there with me for all of them. But the thing that freaked me out and that stopped everything was dream states. The dream states changed significantly so. And one was I was in bed, I hear something upstairs. I get up to walk upstairs. I take a few steps and I'm frozen. My wife is in the bed, says, "Babe, what's wrong?" I say, "I can't move. I'm frozen." I hear something come downstairs and I am terrified. I've never been this scared in my life. And I'm screaming in my head, no, because I think something's coming to get me. I wake up so embarrassed. So embarrassed. I've never been that embarrassed in my life. Because my thought was, if your subconscious is screwing with you, then it's something that you wanted one way or the other. And
right. Wait. So let me ask you this. So you were embarrassed because you felt like you created this.
Yes. And I was no. I was embarrassed because I was scared.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Now listen.
Meaning because it's like you wanted this on some level.
Right.
You've been
That's
trying,
what I'm saying.
Right. And then when you got it, you were terrified.
Right.
It was that.
Yeah.
Nothing happened for another month. Everything stopped. And then it happens once again. And this time I can't get out of it. I'm just in bed. And I'm frozen. I hear something coming downstairs. It's the exact same scene. Something's coming downstairs. And I'm freaking out. Like I am like in bed, like hyperventilating and shit, trying to like get my shit together. And my wife is like, "Babe, you can't do anything about it anyway. Just relax." My wife would never say that. But at the time I'm like, why is she so calm? And I thought she's right. I was like, yeah, she's right. And I hear something break the plane. And I'm keeping myself calm. I'm like, all right, just keep calm. Just keep your shit together. It's okay. And something breaks the plane and I hear something in the room. And then I'm immediately curious. The fear goes away. I'm curious. They're here. Whatever's here is here. It's done. What's the point of look? Like try to look. The paralysis started to ease up. The paralysis basically bled away the moment that I got curious. And the more I got curious, I heard something say, "Hey, he's curious. The paralysis let up just enough where I could pull myself up to look. And there was an African-American woman staring directly at me. And I think to myself, bullshit. At that point, I wake up. At that point, I felt great because I thought you mastered your fear in this weird situation where your subconscious is fucking with you. So I guess I'm putting it this way. From the standpoint of the abduction stuff, at what point in that experience, even in a dream state, was I going to grab shit to bring back?
I forgot why we started this conversation.
I didn't
realize that's where it's going back to.
Like, where the hell am I going to get the alien ashtray?
Right. It's like Jodie Foster going through the machine in Contact. Like she's got no proof, but she's got 3.5 hours of static on her video.
But an entirely subjective experience. Otherwise, if she didn't know.
Right.
You brought something else up that was kind of cool in that you bringing us there about the ashtray, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. But one of the things that I noticed that you said was when you got curious, then you were no longer in this straitjacket. And I almost wonder to what extent we can apply that to science and creativity and life in general. Is when you're no longer curious, you become straitjacketed into this biased way of thinking, and that's not what real science is. Real science is curiosity, and when you're curious, you're not bound by this sort of straitjacket of mainstream academia.
Yeah,
interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
Agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay.
That was deep, guys.
Graham, what's your experience?
Dolphins.
Graham, tell us about you. Tell us about your dream state, sir.
My dream state. Oh my God. I don't remember.
By the way, I'm digging the jacket. The jacket. Love the patches.
Can you tell us what's on the jacket?
This is a jacket, man. Check it out.
What is it? What is it?
There's something on the back too?
No.
Oh, it's an entire jumpsuit. It's an entire suit.
Oh, wow.
It's a flight suit, man.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Is that the UNN commander flight suit, or is it?
I don't think he can hear us. Man. He's got to put on his headset.
Flight suit.
That's cool. I dig it. I dig. But here's the thing. Wait, hold on, Graham. Put your headphones back on. We see the flight suit. Graham, we see the flight suit. Put the headphones back on. Oh my God, that was hilarious.
Graham, I didn't word of anything you said. If you said anything.
No, I know you didn't. Graham, did you get the patches just for that jumpsuit though?
Well, this is an old jumpsuit, actually.
Okay, but
used
I was
to
gonna
work at-
say,
yeah, but
I was
no,
gonna say it would look cool if you had a jacket like that, though.
I know. A
gotta
nice
get
bomber
you one.
jacket, like
Yes,
the
exactly.
old,
That's what I thought
the
it
old
was.
with the sheepskin, and
Yeah,
the leather.
yeah.
And who's your friend behind you, Graham? What's his name?
Oh, that's Nortz, Mr. Alien.
Nortz, nice.
I like
Nortz, Mr. Alien.
it.
Oh.
Nort's
Very
Mr.
nice.
Alien.
Spell
Got
that
it.
Does
backwards.
that ever scare the shit out of you in the room? Like if you fall asleep or something like that, you turn around like, oh my
I
God.
can't spell that backwards, Graham. I'm not one of those kind of minds. What is it? What does it spell backwards?
Neil Armstrong.
Does it?
Oh.
It does. Nortz.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Do you guys believe that Neil Armstrong saw something on the moon? That's a rumor, but
What's that?
I've heard that.
do you
Neil
believe Neil
Armstrong.
Armstrong saw something on the moon?
I don't know. I've heard that story a couple
Lumen
times, and there's the
Island?
transmission that was picked up in Australia, and then
Yeah.
and the transmission it went dark for a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
and that dark transmission was picked up by some receiver in Australia, and you heard them talking about there's something watching us on the moon.
Was
But
it?
who knows? But
I don't
it's
know.
curious that Neil Armstrong was never ever vocal about anything
Buzz was.
with UFOs. Buzz was,
Yeah.
but Neil, he just totally avoided the topic.
What did
Yeah,
what
Buzz
did
has
Buzz
been-
believe? What
Well,
did Buzz
Buzz was
believe?
really squishy on that. Like there have been times
He
when Buzz
talks
would
about-
have
he talks about
implied.
the monolith
Yeah.
on what is it? Was it Phobos? One of the moons of Jupiter, I believe, has a little monolith on it. There's pictures on the internet. You can find it, and you can even get him talking about it. He talks about this thing.
Oh, we got to get him
Go there
drunk.
and
Man.
study
My
it.
kids were telling me that somebody punched a person recently in public because they were talking about the moon landing being.
Oh yeah, that was Buzz
Oh,
Aldrin.
that
Yeah.
was
Oh, was
Yeah.
that
Or
Buzz
no, that
Aldrin?
was no. I thought
Oh,
that
he
was
just-
Neil. I thought that was Neil Armstrong.
Punch somebody?
That is
Yeah,
so
some guy was red in his face saying the moon landing
Yeah.
was faked, and he was like really in his face, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
he had
Buzz
done
is
that
old
before
school,
too.
right?
Yeah.
How old was
And
Buzz
I
Aldrin?
blame-
Buzz Aldrin's like
And
90
he
years
just
old.
boom,
Yeah.
Cold
and
cocked
then he
him.
walked away.
It was
That's
pretty funny.
amazing. Like,
It happened
if
like
I'm
6
90
years
and
ago.
somebody like comes and bashes my life's work, I just want to fucking
Yeah.
cold cock them right in the mouth. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, and he did.
Not to mention you're like the
And it's
second
on
man to
video.
walk on the moon.
You can find
Yeah.
it right now.
You know, I don't know about it, but I have heard James Fox talk about it.
Yeah.
And because James Fox had set up an interview with Neil, and Neil dodged him the first time, and James had hired a whole crew. He flew out to Italy or something
Yeah.
like that to meet him, and then at the last second, Neil's like, "No, I'm not doing it." He's like, "I just spent 20 grand to get here. Like, what do you mean you're not doing it?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just not gonna do it."
Oh,
And
that
he
may have
did-
been the story of the century.
Yeah, no, it
Wow.
could have been. And then at some point they cross paths again, and he tells a very interesting story that Neil. I can't remember exactly.
Well, wait,
what
you're
he
talking about
says. I don't
James
wanna-
Fox tells an interesting
James
story about
Fox tells the story about Neil's apparent story.
Oh wait,
you know.
James Fox says that Neil told him, or he was told of this?
He was talking to a mutual friend or Neil himself behind the scenes. They had agreed to do an interview because he's like, "Man, I got to get this on camera,"
Yeah.
and Neil was like, agreed to it. He was at a festival or something in Italy, and somebody called James and was like, "Okay, Neil's ready to tell the story," because they were promoting a film or something. And then James Fox hired he at the time, this was like I think the late 90s.
Yeah.
It was film. He had to go get a film camera and rent a film camera with a crew that knew how to operate the camera
Film
and
is
fly
expensive,
them to Italy to do an interview with Neil Armstrong. He gets there and he's calling Neil, no answer, just completely just ghosts him.
Blows him off.
Just ghosts him.
Ghosts
and
him.
and James was pissed, and
I
I
can
can
imagine.
understand. I'd be pissed too.
Yeah, I'd be pissed too.
And I think James did something to him where he kind of told his story publicly somewhere. I'm really forgetting the story, which
That's
sucks.
wild.
But I've got so many stories in my brain. I'm get lost on which one's which. I got to go back and refresh my memory.
Yeah.
But check it out. It was James Fox's conversation on that Jake Paul show. or Aaron Paul, one or the other. He did an interview with one of the Paul brothers on YouTube, and it was a cool story, very very cool story.
Buzz Aldrin has always been. It seems like honestly, he's been sheepish about this, and he's been back and forth. I've heard Buzz Aldrin walk back a story at one point, and then it's like, well, why would you have to walk it back? Either it happened or that didn't, Buzz. Which one is it? But no, he's been really cagey about it. But Edgar Mitchell, these guys have been far more in the camp of study. The Clinton leaks,
And
for example.
Gordon Cooper too.
Gordon Cooper's my
Cooper.
favorite.
He's the other one.
Gordon Cooper's my favorite because he was one of the what's that film where it's about the pilots who go into the space program, the original pilots, the original
Oh, the right stuff.
I know what you're talking about.
The
Yeah,
right stuff.
Right stuff.
Like
Yeah.
Gordon Cooper is the right stuff. He was the first guy in space.
Really?
Gordon Cooper, first man in space. Like, I mean, he was.
Well, Yuri Geller was the first man in space.
Or you're right. You're right.
You mean
First American.
space.
First American.
Yeah. That's what I kept. I was like, what? Who?
Yeah, First American. I
Like,
stand
that doesn't
corrected.
sound Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't-
Right.
Wait a second. It wasn't a monkey.
I better
Yeah.
at least know that one.
Yeah, no, first American in space, and dude, his
Bobo,
he
wasn't it?
never ever flinched. I mean, he stuck with his story. I mean, I love his story about him filming planes taking off, I think from Wright Pat or something, and in a craft, he said, came to the edge of the runway. He was filming landings on top secret craft. This thing came to the end of the runway, propped out 3 prongs, landed, and then took back up, retracted the prongs, and flew away.
Wow.
And he filmed it. He turned in the film and never saw it again. And then they're like, well, what happened? He's like, I don't know. Like I don't have the clearance. It was, dude, it's a cool story. And I mean, that's Gordon freaking Cooper, man.
Yeah. Does he do interviews, by the way?
He's dead.
Yeah. What about the other?
Oh, right. He's
fellow that-
A lot of these guys are dead. I mean,
yeah.
What's that, Graham?
Yeah, they're all dead. Yeah, except for Buzz.
Yeah, except for
He's
Buzz.
the last one.
Yep.
The missile test that was supposedly filmed.
Talking about
the
that
missile
scientist
test going up, and the UFO comes in and shoots the lasers all around. and blows it
Yeah.
up.
That guy was at the citizen hearings. I'm forgetting his name, but I know
Yeah.
But
exactly what you're talking
Greer
about.
has got him too during an interview and on the Disclosure Channel. Yeah, like I mean, like I said, I used to when I first started in this, I watched and listened to everything. And so what's his name? The gentleman that you mentioned with the one arm, I'd gone through all of his contact tapes.
Billy Meyer.
Yeah,
all
Billy
the weird
Meyer.
disclosure tapes. And somewhere along the way, I was like, you know what? You can only go as far as you can defend.
Right.
That's where I'm at. That's where I ended up.
Yeah.
So it's good knowing all of that background stuff. The alien eating baby stuff, I wish I would have avoided. But
Hey, you gotta go there though. You gotta go there just to get. It's nice to touch.
go there?
You do. It is nice. It is nice to touch. And look, there is something to be said.
argue against
Michael,
that.
hold on. I'll tell you why. There is something to be said for being able to go that far down the rabbit hole and walk yourself back.
yeah.
But not every. But here's the thing: not
I
everybody.
know,
wanted
but
themselves
the
back.
people. But I did. Jamarl did. That's
did,
my point. Like we
Well,
went
dope
there.
on you guys, but
I know, right? I know.
Hey, look, I think that's changing. The sea's changing on that stuff.
Yeah, there's so many different theories about what it could be, and anyone who says they know, like you've all heard this, right? Anyone who says they know, they don't know.
They don't know.
Unless it's like, well, I can't think of anyone.
Nobody. Nobody.
Yeah.
Because you,
My
So-
co-host- so my
so who
co-host
knows?
got into a really good conversation today about the UFO stuff, about
Could be anything.
rights.
Any of those theories that are out there,
Well, we got
except the baby eating one.
baby, not that species.
That's-
Yeah, we got into conversation on rights and this notion of rights God-given. Now, for my argument, rights are God-given, with one caveat: there's certain things that humanity needs in order to keep themselves self-actualized. So, you need food, clothing, shelter, et cetera, those type of things. And without those things, sense of purpose, that person suffers. Well, can that be considered on some level natural rights, since without those things, people suffer? But what about another species on another planet? it may be dramatically different. Meaning, if our understanding of society and each other is coming basically from our environmental circumstances and the things that we need as human beings, what does it mean for that to take place on a different planet? And if it is taking place on a different planet, it means that what we consider to be rights may not exist for somewhere else or not exist in the way. So when people are like, "Oh, I was abducted," and they were just staring at me. Well, they may not have understood why you were acting the way you were acting, you know. And I'm just assuming it's just, postulating. I'm just making the point that, like, it is very wild when you start thinking of outside of us. The other interesting thing was Scientific America. I'm not sure if you guys saw this today, where they came over the article, maybe the aliens are already here. Now, talking about chest thumping on that article, because it means that they realize on some level, guys, we got to get ahead of this.
Right.
We're missing this. Like
Right.
all of these guys are having congressional hearings. The Pentagon
Everyone's
has
so
basically
stupid.
released videos. We've had the Navy change their protocols. We've had Radcliffe. We had all of these people behind the scenes of Rubio looking at these top secret documents, and the scientists are like, it's not real.
Yeah.
Look at this.
we're
Rachel
missing
The opposite,
Rachel
right?
Maddow. Rachel Maddow is doing an ET spot right now.
Yeah, TMZ, right?
Wow. So cats are
This is
rerun
not to be
later.
and this is the thing. Like, this has become so mainstream, and you're right,
Yes, it is.
Jamar. Like, it's like, oh, how do we stay ahead of this? And I think that's where we also got to be careful too, because we can easily get ahead of ourselves, and the media can easily get ahead of itself. And as much as you'd like or dislike Mick West, one of the things he points out is this feedback loop that you can get with the media and people and the government, and media and people in the
Agreed.
government, and right. And so we have to be careful about how we talk about how we have these conversations. But I
don't
think
dislike. Let me just be very clear for the Mick West thing, because I think I started in a weird way with that. I don't dislike Mick West. I think people like Mick West are needed. I just need people like Mick West to be earnest when they are presenting that stuff. When they think, okay, like, this is bogus. Don't tell me it's seagulls. Don't tell me that two people looking at the exact same object are
You know
all of a
what,
sudden
Jamarl?
missing stuff. Don't tell me that stuff. That
You know what,
nonsense. Because at that
Jamarl?
point, I'm going to disbelieve you as being full of it. If Mick
Dude.
West wants to do that, let him do that. But I need him to be, meaning, if two people are seeing a plane, don't tell me that it's seagulls. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me it's swamp gas.
Well,
Don't do
dude,
that.
you know what I'm going to say? Honestly, I swear to God, go listen to our interview with him last night.
Oh, what happened? Something changed?
I think everything you just said,
he admitted.
he agreed. He agreed.
He didn't
to
admit
that.
it in my interview.
I know, but it was a different set of questions in your interview. It was just go. I promise you,
I'll check
go
it out.
back,
I'll check it out.
go
I'll check
back
it out.
and listen to it, because look, he admitted to us on our show that the most perplexed and thing that he has not debunked is the David Fravor, Alex Dietrich story.
We asked him if what was the most difficult, what was a case where you couldn't debunk something, and he said it was the Alex Dietrich, David Fravor experience. And he said, and so Jamarl, I see you shaking your head because I know that he didn't have the conversation with Alex Dietrich prior to your interview, but he had it after. And I think his conversation with Alex Dietrich changed his mind.
Mm-hmm. It changed him on some level. If it didn't,
It's funny how
well,
a conversation
here's
can change it, but tons of data doesn't do anything.
But here's the thing: is that it's not data, Graham. It's not. We've got snippets of video. We don't have the radar. We don't have the other instruments. He's right. Like when I asked this to Avi Loeb today. Avi Loeb will not go to these things are real until he can. We asked him, what's the thing that's going to convince you, Mick? He's like, if I could get a video with two cameras from two different angles, now you've got something that I can really dive my teeth into, because that's going to be a lot more difficult for me to explain. And he also said that the alien theory, it's not that he's taken it off the table. He's like, it's just lower on my list of things that I think it could be. But if you put the data in front of me, the actual data, then I will change my tune. I mean, he admitted that, and he's right. On some levels, he's absolutely right, because what is it going to take for science to change their tune? And it's going to have to be a multi-camera radar tracking type of thing, where it's not only the radar, the two cameras, the four pilots, and it's all presented to people in one shot, not leaked, not this, not that, something that science can look at and go, okay, this is real.
they
And
gotta
now
go
we
with
can
guys like-
say it.
You know what
Science
else
and
he
limited
admitted?
data.
You know what else he
guys like
admitted?
Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku and all these guys in a room and give them the top secret clearance and give
that's
them the
okay.
top secret briefing.
Until they get,
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff is going to be under top secret clearance. And science,
Yeah,
if
but
that's
get these
true,
guys into it.
science is never going to come around for the next several years. I mean, and I think that's unfortunate.
The other thing he admitted, Jamaro, was that he has bias. He has a hypothesis. He's approaching it from that direction, and he realizes. And I called him on that, and he was like, "Well, yeah, because I said it's the idea." The analogy like in Hinduism, like what God is, and it's like the elephant, and we're all blind men, and we're all like one person grabs the trunk and one person grabs the leg, and we're all feeling something different. Yeah. And I brought that same thing up to this. He's like, well, no, because we all have the same data. I said, yes, but we all approach it with a different set of experiences and a different bias. And so that gives us a different vision when we're all looking at the same thing. And he agreed to that.
I'm okay with Mick West being biased. I mean, like, honest to God, but there's something to be said for, okay, this is what I know, this is what I believe. Those two things can exist together where it's like, I think this, but I don't know that. And when you're getting certain information and data to be able to be like, yeah, I can explain that, and not just seagulls. My issue is when you're encountering something that you can't necessarily explain, and you come up with, oh, God has created lightning. It becomes that. I don't want that. If you can't explain it, just say I can't explain it. If it's difficult to explain, it's difficult to explain. Everything.
Well, but that's the thing. He did. I mean, he did that on our show.
He didn't do it on mine.
I know. But I think it's. Well, here's the thing though, Jamal. Ask him to come on again, and he will. That guy will not say no to you, especially if you treat him with the intellectual respect that you do. And that's what I do love about him is anytime I do and I've said this a couple times, sometimes we get those pilots or those people that have made a rebuttal to Mick West or whatever, and they're fighting on Twitter, and I'm like, hey, you want to talk to Mick West? Because I think this would be better if we talk this out. Yeah. Mick West is always like, yep, I'll be there. Tell me what time and where. And the other person will not. They'll kind of lag. They won't commit because they're intimidated. You better come with your facts when you come against Mick West. He may be a video game programmer.
Mick West doesn't come with facts. I'm sorry.
But he's the only guy doing the math, Jamal.
But is he doing the math? If you're telling me the two pilots looking at the same thing and they're just getting it wrong, they're seeing a mirage, then I'm going to think that there's something wrong with your analysis of that event.
He changed his tune. He doesn't think that about the Fraser and Dietrich incident.
I'm making the point that for the longest time he has been doing that. So I get that on your one video he did that.
But isn't it okay to
make stuff up
again? No. To get new experience and new information and change your perspective. And I think that's what happened with him.
Has Mick West changed his perspective in debunking everything that comes up?
No, I don't think that kind of perspective change has happened. But what I do think is that
he didn't see the light.
Look, here's the thing: is he's had a conversation with one out of the two pilots that has been public. Right. And that's in that one conversation, I think really, because watch the interview, man. All she does is stay quiet and listen and let him drown in his own silly explanation. He starts prefacing things with "Stop me if this sounds crazy," or "I'm sorry if this is insulting," or he never prefaces anything with "This could be wrong," but he is now. And I think it's partly because of that discussion he had with her. It threw him off his game, and he admitted to us. And we have to allow him this. And it's a great question. Did that conversation with Dietrich change your perspective any at all on this? And I think if he's being honest, which he probably will be with you, he'll say yes. Because we did not get that tone last night with him. We really and when I tell you, we had some people on there who really wanted to sink their teeth into Mick, and it was a calm, rational, wonderful discussion with him.
No, Mick is never angry or aggressive. I've never seen him thrash about.
No, that's his move.
Very
dude.
easy to talk.
I don't know how he does it, man.
His move is to get you riled up, and he stays calm. But that didn't happen with Dietrich. There was no riling up. There's no but. It was just okay. Well, let me tell you why. And she didn't say this, but in so many words, she's like, I disagree.
Yeah.
And here's why. And it was rational. And the guy said on our show, he doesn't know what it is. He's got his number one theory is the balloon theory. That's his number one thing, because in his brain, that scientifically makes the most sense. But I think he's not absolute on that.
He's not. And he said that I have not debunked that. I have not debunked that.
I straight up said I've not debunked it.
Yeah, which is huge. So
I think it was new too. It was a new thing. But yeah, dude,
we are well over our 2 hours.
Yeah.
I just want to thank Jamarl Thomas. If you have not followed Jamarl, if you are not on his YouTube channel, if you are not following the Progressive Soapbox on Twitter, you're a mad person. You're clinically insane. Please make sure you follow this man. He is amazing. Jamarl, I hope you'll come back very, very soon. It was such a pleasure. I could literally speak with you all day long.
I enjoy the hell out of these, because usually it's like when I'm talking to people, it's not about UFO stuff, right? It's like I am bringing up the UFO stuff and I'm the originator of it. I'm like pushing hard on it and having the fights about it. But rarely do I get to just hang out with people who just want to talk about this stuff. So I love it. Anytime you guys want me, just invite. I'm here.
Sweet. We'll check your DMs, homie.
Amazing.
Wait, what a miss. What happened?
Nothing. I'm just saying, you're going to be here anytime. Check your DMs.
I think Lou is saying that sometimes he doesn't hear back from you.
No, that's not what I'm saying. No. No, I'm saying.
Okay.
Dude.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah. Checks in the mail. Checks in the mail. I just sent it. All I'm saying, I just sent it. Like checks in the mail.
That was just what I heard. I thought.
Graham to the rescue. Graham to the rescue. No. That was dude. Jamarl has been more than precious with his time. He's been on my show 2 or 3 times. He's now come on this show, dude. The dude loves talking about this. We are his release, his guilty pleasure.
Man.
Yeah, we're the guilty pleasure
for the UFO stuff.
Exactly. And I'm happy to be that role in your life, my friend. I'll tell you that right now.
So Jamarl, if people want to find you, on YouTube or Twitter, how can they find you, Jamarl?
So on YouTube, I'm on Jamarl Thomas, Jamarl Thomas, Thomas. I have my own channel and of course the radio show, and I have Twitter, the Prague Soapbox. And by the way, it's a lefty political show, so just be aware.
Yeah.
Nothing lefty. I don't mean Democrat.
I think it's a very middle of the road political.
You think so? I'm not a Democrat at all.
I know you're not. I know you're not. I watch your show. I know you're not.
Frankly, just like the party. So what I tell people is like the left, sometimes they're affiliated with that. It's not that I have my own political point of view, perspective. I think my thing is, I think people should have healthcare, education, because I think those things are necessary for an individual to be a whole person. That on some point puts me on the left. So I take it.
And you often hold the left to task, which we also appreciate, because I think
which is why they hate my guts.
Power.
I don't have any friends on the left, right?
Well, yeah.
We need to hold power accountable.
Dude. I live in Hollywood. You want to talk about friendless? Woo. Oh boy, I am as right wing as people get. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm a Cuban. All right, sure. I guess I'm right wing now. All right, okay. Sorry, Graham.
For those of you who don't know, if you're living under a rock and you haven't seen The Expanse, make sure you go check it out. Graham, tell people where they can find you and your role on The Expanse, so they know.
Yeah.
Well, my role on The Expanse, like the pants I'm wearing are X-Pants.
Dude, the dad jokes
it's very minor.
Loaded in your gun are insane. Yeah. Like unlimited dad jokes from you, Graham. I love it. Keep going. X-Pants. This guy. All right.
Yeah, it's a very minor role. I appear in like 3 episodes, I think, maybe season 3 and 4. It's Union Commander Stenson, and I'm kind of a badass guy to the Belters, and I blow a few things up, but yeah.
Oh, The Expanse!
If they want to find you on Twitter,
The Expanse, yes, The Expanse.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying X-Pants. I'm like, X-Pants.
Yeah.
What the hell is X-Pants?
Yeah.
No.
All right, what season are you in? I'm going to binge watch that right now.
It's
3 and 4.
3 or 4. All right.
Oh, there goes Neil.
Wait, episode 3 and 4 or season 3 and 4?
It's not his first crash.
Wait, episode 3 or 4, season 3 or 4?
Season 3, episode 8, I think it is. Oh, here.
Nice.
Everyone write this
season
down.
4?
Grab your pen and paper.
I need an
Season 4.
autograph. I need an autograph.
In season 4, my voice, in the first episode, my voice is the first thing you hear.
Nice.
And then I tell them to stop. Some refugees are fleeing, and I tell them to stop heading toward the place they're going. I don't want to give anything away.
No, don't
But,
tell me. I'm gonna watch it.
my voice is the first thing you hear, and then
No, don't tell me. I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it now.
4, episode 2 or 3, I'm not sure. I'm in there again. It's very
Oh,
minor,
dude, that's so
and I
cool.
was very lucky to get the part, and because it's led to other things. But
I'm so impressed by this.
yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
and if you really want, you can go to YouTube. I have an old YouTube channel. I haven't contributed to it in years. It's called Mr. UFO News.
Nice.
And
You need to
looks-
restart that, buddy. You
it
got to
looks
restart that. With
Yeah,
everything that's coming
I know.
out now.
I know. Well, I used a program that was free through YouTube, where you could type in what you wanted to say, and they would animate it for you.
Mm.
And
Oh, yeah,
the company that had that went out of business, I guess. So I didn't have that anymore, and I couldn't do it myself. So I just haven't contributed to it. But it takes a look at the UFO topic, all different stories. It looks at all the wild, wacky ones, like Project Serpo, Pegasus Project, where they had the
People put in
alien
craft
exchange
that
thing.
went to another planet.
Yeah. As was depicted at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I have a couple celebrity interviews. I have a little interview with the amazing Kreskin, if you know who that is. He's a mentalist. You know who he is?
No, I haven't heard of the meme.
I remember.
he holds
Yeah,
I remember the
I wanted
Amazing
to say
Jonathan.
magician, but
Yeah, he prefers mentalist.
Mm.
Yeah. He holds the world record for having the most appearances on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Believe it or
Oh,
not.
okay. I know you're talking about.
Yeah,
I know
big
you're talking about.
big glasses
yeah,
guy.
Yep. Yep. I got it.
Yeah, he wants his tombstone to read. "Even
apparently
now,
you've also
I know
played.
what
You've
you're
also played
thinking."
Lincoln. You've played Lincoln as well, and somebody says you're
No,
Play
I
Lincoln?
wouldn't play
airplane
Lincoln.
reboot. Graham is Captain Over. Is that accurate?
With Captain Over.
I think
I don't know.
somebody's
Over, that's airplane.
Oh, you
the
played
movie
an airplane?
No, they're
No.
talking about a reboot.
Yeah, you'd be a perfect Leslie
Yes, he
Nielsen.
will.
Ever seen a Gladiator movie, Jimmy?
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
Exactly.
We're counting on you.
Oh
Love
man.
it.
Well,
That's actually
it's
a
been an
remake.
absolute pleasure. What's that?
Airplane is a remake of an old black and white movie. What's it called? 0 Hour.
Oh, damn! I didn't
didn't
realize
know
it was
that.
a remake.
I don't know.
I didn't know that.
Pops
Yeah,
up
let's
on the celebrity lookup thing that the kids use all the time.
IMDb.
Yeah.
Yeah, the celebrity lookup.
Oh, IMDb, yeah. I'm on there, believe it or not.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
today. It's been an
I
absolute
just
pleasure.
found
We
that
are
out
going
the
to
other
have
day. I
you all
Googled
back
myself.
again very soon.
That was fun.
guys, thanks for
Guys,
this. Have a good one.
Anytime.
Nice seeing all of you, man.
we go ahead and
Nice to meet you, Jamal.
say
See you again, Kristen. Thank
Marl
you.
and
Have a good one,
Graham.
guys.
Thank you guys so much. It was an absolute pleasure. We'll do it again soon. Bye-bye.
Wait.
Oh, so amazing.
Yeah.
Wait,
Whew.
do we lose you?
No.
Okay.
No. I
Awesome.
took him.
What a
I
show.
took everybody out of the room because it was getting crazy.
It's clippy, right?
It's clippy. It's
Getting clippy?
Yeah, it was getting a little clippy.
Yeah.
All right, let's end the show.
All right. Well, that's all I got. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining the Singularity Lab, and we'll see you on UCR tomorrow. We've got a great
That's
show
right.
for you, Lou. Who do we got tomorrow?
So tomorrow we got Ryan Sprague, and we've got our head guest is going to be Jason McClellan. He's going to be up first. Ryan's going to join us a little bit into it, and then yeah, we're going to have our Skinwalker Ranch review episode 7. I think we're on, right? So we got to go watch tonight. Is today Wednesday? No, today's Tuesday.
Today's
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
I'll watch
Oh, it
tomorrow
comes
on History
No,
Channel,
it comes out tonight.
on
We do our reviews
web.
on Tuesdays. What's going on, man? We're tired. Okay. Anyway, join us
Wednesday.
tomorrow. Wednesday, we're doing the review. Tonight, the show actually premieres, is what I meant. Anyway, so then on Thursday, who do we got, Mikey?
We've
Stephen
got Stephen Greenstreet here on the Singularity Lab. If you did not subscribe, do it now.
Subscribe. Man, we got to 100 viewers. Thank you guys for sharing the channel. That was awesome. I think we had 100 viewers pretty much for the whole show. And then also on Friday, we've got a great panel lining up right now. That's what I sent Jamar. I'm like, dude, you got to come on the show Friday. We got to talk about this UAP report. So we're going to try and get Jamar on the show Friday, among some other folks as well. So stay tuned. It's going to be a very, very fun discussion. Yeah. Anything else, Mikey?
That's it. Nope. We'll see you guys soon.
Peace.
You gonna take us out?